back to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me today, I have Josh Torres.
Why are the Moogles so ugly?
We have James Galizio.
Hey, you take that back.
We have Chow Min Woo.
Okay, Kupo.
And then joining us today, we've got Josh Tolentino.
Good morning.
Hey, Josh. And then just kind of side note here, we will refer to Josh Tolentino as Josh 2, and then Josh Torres as Josh or Josh 1.
Yeah,
Or
because we can't do
something
it
along
like
those
Josh T
lines.
because we can't. Both of our last names starts with T, so it can't be Josh T either.
Can't even do Josh T.O. either. It's like,
Yeah,
A second Josh T has hit the Tetracast.
that's right.
There we go. So if you listen to our Game of the Year cast from, early in January, both Joshes were on that podcast as well. So you have heard both these voices before. The reason why we have invited both Joshes to this episode of the Tetracast, very clearly, today our main focus of discussion is going to be on the release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Of course, we were able to talk about this very briefly last week because the review embargo had lifted, but the game hadn't fully released yet. So myself and James, who had early access to the game, talked about it a little bit just to try to tee it up, but we kind of pushed the main discussion of Final Fantasy VII Remake to this week because now the game's out, and everyone that I've introduced has had a chance to at least start playing it. So Josh 2, myself, and James were able to get some early access to the game, and then Chow and Josh have been playing the game since its release. So we'll be kind of talking about all of our experiences with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, before we get started, I'm going to give Josh 2 the floor first because he was the one that reviewed the game for us. But just so everyone's aware, this is going to be a spoiler-free discussion. We're not going to say this is what happens to who in what order. We're just going to talk about our impressions of the game, kind of at the same level that you would if you were reading a review of the game. We'll talk about how we feel about the story, about the characters, about the combat. We'll talk about locations. We'll talk about how we're enjoying the game, what we like, anything that we don't like. So we will not spoil anything. If you're worried about if you're playing through the game and you haven't reached the end, don't worry. We're not going to say
I
anything.
think it's fair
on
if
that
we
line.
can say anything about like the opening cutscene because I think that's something worth talking about. I guess from the people who are like who press new game on this.
Yeah,
then,
okay, that's good. That's a good point.
Like the first 5 minutes, like okay, what the fuck?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Like we will
that
talk as if you've been able to boot up the game and play for an hour, and at least give you the premise of how the game is set up in that fashion. So, and then of course, if obviously we have the magic of post-process editing or whatever, so we can make sure to go through our podcast recording at the end to make sure that it's all trimmed up and safe to listen to if you haven't finished the game yet. And we will likely keep any sort of spoiler considerations to an end of the year cast when we're talking about how we're ranking the game at the very end in several months' time. But for now, a spoiler-free kind of review, a group review, and a group like in progress, impressions of Final Fantasy VII Remake. So without further ado, I'll hand it off over to Josh 2 first, who put up a review on our website, rpgsite.net, for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I know me and you and others, including James and Alex, have been in discussion for the last several weeks as we've been playing through this game. But I'll just leave it to you because there's a ton to talk about in terms of the different ways we can tackle this discussion. But I'll just kind of let you take the reins and talk about your time with the game, writing the review for it, and your thoughts on it.
Okay, yeah. Hi, once again, Josh Tolentino here. I wrote the review for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I think this is something that a couple of other I kind of wish I had mentioned it in my review, but I believe this was I think this is a tagline from The Verge, and I really agree with it. And they say it's kind of a AAA game with the soul of 1997 kind of animating it, and that's really how I felt at the time. It's not just that, not just that, not just out of the sense that these are characters who were from 1997 and thereabouts, but in the sense like you've got a mentality in it that's you don't see as much anymore in games that are made on this scale. Um, for better or worse, it's like a AAA game from 1997 had managed to worm its way into a modern into a modern AAA game process, and they blended together and made something that really sort of transports you back to that time, to that feeling, while still keeping a bunch of like modern game design considerations, like especially with being a massive open world game that takes several, I'd say it takes maybe twice as long to complete as the original, I think, unless you were really into grinding stuff in the original PS1 version. Like and narratively, and the thing is also narratively, it's kind of a sequel. I'm honestly not sure how to predict how some folks might react if this is their very first brush with Final Fantasy VII, if the only thing they've ever heard of it was other people talking about the PS1 game before it. But um there's a lot of stuff here that kind of, I wouldn't say it relies on you being familiar with I mean, on you having played the original, but it's kind of it's just like Final Fantasy VII remake. It's in conversation with the whole of everything that's happened in Final Fantasy, is in Final Fantasy like seven fiction over the last, is it, I think it's about
It was
25.
the compilation of FF7
Yeah,
project. Yeah.
yeah,
So
there's the like that stuff, like Advent Children, even like Crisis Core, all of those games sort of inform it. They may not, I'm not sure if they'd be considered required. I wouldn't, I don't really feel that they'd be called required reading, but there's really a sense that it's referring to things that you're not 100, that may not would be 100% aware of if you haven't been in deep with the compilation. And then it's also got like a lot of fan service for people who remember that stuff, like
And it's interesting that you bring that up because I wrote the review 4 years ago for Remake on the site, and I said one thing that Remake kinda does is that it's sort of self-aware, and it assumes it almost not so subtly implies that it kind of it makes the assumption that the player is also aware, kinda even if they're not, and that's where that's kind of, I didn't know, like, how I felt about that at the time. It's like, even at the starting of this podcast, should I assume that people know how, I guess we should make the assumption that anyone going into Rebirth knows how Remake plays out, and then you go back, you dial it back one level, do people playing Remake know how the original turned out? And the answer is not always. So that kind of makes discussing like whether this is a semi-sequel or a true sequel or a retelling or kind of multiple things at once a little bit tricky, which I'm okay with because it makes the game kind of have an interesting like place in terms of its position within the larger media landscape of the seven compilation or whatever. But it does make kind of discussing its importance and it tricky in that sense.
yeah, I think it's because you have so many audiences from different perspectives coming in. You have the people who played the original FF7 on PS1 and have a pretty good memory of the events that happened into it. Then you have the people who played that same game but have like an unreliable, like they don't remember it quite as much. Like they kind of remember the gist of it, of how something events played out, but they don't exactly remember like the finer details or the beat by beat moment. Which is, for that's perfectly natural for people who only played it once or twice, who haven't played it recently. Then you have newcomers going to FF7 remake for the first time, who never played FF7 before, but they've heard of it through osmosis, through popular conversation throughout the years in games of, like, when people talk about what happened in FF7 or the most popular moments and these characters. A lot of people who never played the original FF7 do know who Cloud and Sephiroth are, you know, because it's just that those characters, those two, are just been so ubiquitous throughout gaming media over the years. Then you consider like the dual meaning of remaking the title, both between, like, it is a remake of the FF7 of, like, this part of the game, but it's also a remake in the sense it's like it's kind of its entire whole new entire thing as well. That, like, even people who played the original are exposed to a lot of new things that weren't present in the original, and so on. And then now we're all going into this new second installment of this new telling of FF7 together. Of like, we don't exactly know where they're gonna take this, but I think that's the exciting part about it. Of lessons learned from the past and where they want to take this after expanding the universe of FF7 so much throughout the years. And I think it's just they're working on so many levels and trying to and having to like think about those different sorts of audiences from different perspectives coming in. It must be such a challenge, especially to for the second part of a trilogy. How do you make this as important, as iconic as like the first part of the of this FF7 like remake trilogy, right?
I replayed in preparation for Final Fantasy VII Remake because I was reviewing it. I replayed Final Fantasy VII, which is a bit silly, but also a bit not because you can play through the Midgar portion of the original game in 5 hours. Uh, but I played through the whole thing, so I reminded myself of basically everything that takes place that would have, it was 4 years ago, but relatively fresh in my mind for Rebirth. And one thing, like if I had not replayed Final Fantasy VII, the story events that Rebirth covers was what most of my memory remembered. So basically, it's disc one. Remake and
Hmm.
Rebirth is disc one of the original game. I kind of had to think to myself, like, wait a minute, what's past disc one? Like, I had to learn, oh yeah, the event. I'm not gonna say what the events are because the events of disc one are kind of where you meet all the characters. It's where you're introduced to most of the locations. There are some somewhat iconic things after disc one, but like you have like the huge materia quest or whatever, which is not well received, or in my opinion anyways. But like when back in 2015 when we had the E3 of Dreams where Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced, most of the events in my mind about like the events I was looking forward to seeing fully realized in a new version of the game take place here in Rebirth. This is the game I think most people were waiting for in terms of seeing those events, those characters, those locations reimagined in this new light. Of course, at the time, we had no idea what they were going to do with the Whisper storyline and all that stuff. But for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it is very present, especially how the game opens up, and we'll talk about that. But for a lot of the runtime, just like in Remake, it takes like a similar level of backseat where it presents the events of the original game more or less intact. There are some nuanced differences, and depending on the context, we might go or not go into those. But you'll go to Costa del Sol and Cosmo Canyon and all the other locations that you would in the original game, and they're so well realized. And I'll talk about that more later. But going back to Josh 2's original point, this game is like even it was described and marketed as having kind of like this open world, wide linear, almost Xenoblade-esque kind of format to it, where you're outside early on in the game, and you played the demo. You saw this. You're in the two regions of the grassland, and then in the demo, the Junon region. Outside of those, and that's basically like the first two major locations in the game. And if you exhaust those locations, like I saw people, I was kind of following up on like Reddit comments and forums and Twitter, like people are not going to like pass the first region until like 10 hours into the game. And like, yep, that kind of aligns with my time. Like each area of the game can take like 10, 12, 15 hours if you exhaust it. And that is very different from Remake, where it's mostly more or less you're being pulled along a linear path, and you have a few sections in the slums and in Sector 7 where you'll have a smattering of quests to do with either Tifa or Aerith. But for the most part, you're just kind of following the pre-described route, where Rebirth doesn't really have that.
My friend described this as a shitty Ubisoft game with Final Fantasy 7 characters.
That's
I kind
funny.
of I kind of get it, but it's like the way I see it, it's
I
like
wouldn't
a
say shitty,
Well,
but
I do. Well, I mean, I
get
have a friend too that does not like the open world stuff at all in this game. That's totally
Mhm.
understandable. Like, like I just at this point they're just probably gonna mainline it because you're just like they feel like it's too much busy work. The open world stuff does like it bothers you to
it's
the point that just like
overwhelming when they just throw that right at once. I was like, wow, there's like a million new mechanics. There's all this. It's like, holy shit, what is going on? And some people definitely didn't enjoy it. I mean, we even got like an experience from Page's experience with this game that he did not like this at all. Like, it's it's not for everybody, but I'm open to it.
yeah. For me, like I played worse open world stuff, so it's not like to say like the open world stuff in here is bad, but like I played so many other open world games that just like did this formula much worse. And for me in Rebirth, like it's varied enough where it's like for a roller coaster. Some parts I like, some parts I dislike. Like going through the shrines to make the summons, you can learn more lore about the summons, but to make them weaker for those fights, that gets repetitive. But I'm like, okay, it's whatever. But then there's like other like side quests, like the second proto relic thing in the like in the Junon region, like that whole storyline. I won't say what it is. It's hilarious. It's funny. It's weird, but it's great. And I'm just like,
It's got the charm of the '90s. Like '90s, like have a lot of like dorky things.
Yeah.
And most people like, oh, are you serious? Like that tells you that guy never played OG FF7.
Like for me, like and the key thing about the open world thing for me in Rebirth is like it doesn't really overstay its welcome like how other games would do it, where like it feels like traversing to the next point feels like it takes fucking forever, where you have to climb like a huge ass mountain to get to like the next spot, for example. Like a thing that comes to mind is like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where it just feels like it took forever to get like to where you wanted to go on in that map because it was so big. And here it's like you can get to these places really fast when you have a chocobo. You can there's a pretty robust fast travel system where it's not just limited to chocobo spots. It's at every single like location that you completed. That acts as a fast travel spot now. So it's like getting around the map goes by really quickly, and the open world stuff barely takes like maybe 4 to 5 hours, really, depending on how thorough you are. But you can just kind of go zoom through it really fast and have a good time. There'll be some parts that you like, some parts that you dislike. Generally speaking, it's not going to be like a fucking masterpiece every time. Like, for example, like the enemy intel stuff is like the subjectives are kind of dumb because like some of the subjects are like go stagger, like pressure an enemy, stagger an enemy, and then kill them in a time limit. Generally, and then some of the challenges with this stuff is like I'm killing them faster than I can like stagger them. For example, it's like
Yeah, there's
okay,
no way you can complete those tasks once you're over leveled, right?
well, I mean, you just have to like kind of like take a back seat to it, where like you activate the pressure condition, and then like I would switch to Tifa, for example, just spam her basic attack to raise the stagger gauge up very fast, and I just have to take it slower instead of just like killing them immediately because that's what the sub objective says. It's not the most amazing or engaging thing ever, but I'm just like, okay, I'll play that the way that you want it to because it's just so it goes by so fast. Like it's not a big deal, especially like the instant retry on those missions. It's like if you fuck it up the first time, you can just like immediately retry it right then and there and go at it again. So I think it's for me. I already enjoy Rebirth a lot more than I did in Remake because of that open design. You get to see just inherently, right? Like there's more of a variety of scenery, more variety of places that you visit. There's more just variety in the things that you're engaging in, the activities that you're doing. It's just like, and you're kind of doing something different like every 20 minutes in this game, which is a nice thing. Bro, like in Remake, it's really cool to see that Midgar realized and what it looks like in a modern, like with modern technology, but like that corridor gameplay and like there's so many it was designed for the PS4 first and foremost, so you had like some environmental design that was like just so slow, like squeezing through those narrow corridors often,
Yeah,
having to
there's some
like
of that in Rebirth, but it's much lessened.
yeah, it's much lessened. And in my replay of Remake just like a week ago in prep for this game, it's just like the thing that stuck out to me in that is like there's so many times in that game that like you cannot start controlling your character until like maybe 3 to 4 seconds after like a scene happens, and because it's just kind of like
You're forced to walk.
yeah, exactly. You're just kind of like forced to watch like this frame for like 3 to 4 seconds before it allows you to like control the character again. It's like why? I don't know why, but it's just like, and
Yeah,
it's annoying. It's annoying.
that's what happens when you're on the PS4. Have to use that inferior hardware.
So I know it's probably just an inherent design thing when they were making the game, and while Rebirth kind of lessens that, it's not necessarily
Not
completely gone,
completely. There was
but
one
it's
thing that was hilarious. I'm playing on performance mode. I was in
Mhm.
that Junon, and there was a cutscene where you're talking to like the mayor. Won't spoil what happened, but you're
Yeah,
talking to the mayor. I could see the
yeah.
backgrounds like trying to load the texture, then
Oh
it
yeah, yeah.
disappeared,
Mhm.
then it comes back.
Yeah, there's definitely technical issues, but in general, like I'm willing to take those technical issues for a more solid frame rate, smoother frame,
So,
that.
Josh, too, what did you think of the open world?
Um, there's definitely, yeah, especially if you have, or like if you're like mentally, if you're completely done with that style of open world stuff, I can totally see where people are coming from who did not like it. But for me, it's like I think I'm not sure if I mentioned it in my review, but it definitely felt like, even open world bullshit is fun if you're doing it with friends, and these people kind of have been friends, quote unquote, of mine for like for the last 20 years. So, I mean, this is coming from someone who did play Final Fantasy VII at the time and who did enjoy remake because I'm seeing all these characters again and they're all in high res and all of that. So it's like it's kind of I wouldn't say that they are my friends, but they have so much more presence, they have so much more character by the strength of that lore that's built up over however many decades, and they're there, and then that's fine. Like I mean, I'll climb a tower with you, Barrett. I'll climb a tower and put some icons on the map. I mean, it's not all. I mean, they're not all winners, but like you said, like with the variety that's happening in this open world, and that you're always doing it with these guys, with these buddies, and yeah, it's like it feels like it feels like it matters. I mean,
Well, one of the nice things
you get
is
kind of invested in it, and then it's like, and all of these activities are kind of connected, or most of them anyway. I mean, the tower climbing, there's no connection except to Chadley and his Chad module, but
I love
like
that, the chat module.
the Chad module, that's a really good. Anyway, the not everything is connected to the characters, but most of it is. It's like the side quests, especially. You've always got kind of a designated partner out of the party, and then when you do it, it increases your bond with them. No matter how much bullshit it is, it's like, okay, I will haul around this can to attract this chicken. I will follow this dog across town, and there will be unique music for the dog, and there's going to be a battle variant of that dog theme, and the battle variant
Ow, ow,
goes
ow, ow,
Yeah,
ow,
yeah,
ow.
that's a really good point that you're gonna that you brought it that I was planning on bringing up. Is like the charm of these side activities that you do in the open
it's
world and side
charm.
quests is is there's unique music and there's unique conversations. Like you mentioned the dog escort side quest, there's unique music and there's also unique conversation between Cloud and Barrett, mentions Marlene during that dog escort quest. I won't go into the details of like what they chatted about and like the context of that quest, but like it's like kind of nice just like filling in like what these characters are thinking, what where their worries are, and and just both past, present, and future for them, just kind of making them more believable as characters that exist in this world.
Hmm. I hear I think I've got a sound bite for it, but it's a lot of open world bullshit kind of feels like it's there to make the game longer. And here, and that's it's not. While Final Fantasy VII Rebirth isn't entirely free of that feeling, in some cases, for me at least, it feels like instead of making it feel like the game is longer, it makes it feel like it's coming from people who kind of care,
Mhm.
or it's coming from
Yeah,
a place of, it's coming from a place of, hey, we're making this so that you have time to hang out with your buds, not
yeah, yeah.
not we're making this so that this game, which is going to cost which costs most of you $70, is worth your money, as we think.
Right.
Well, one thing
Uh,
that also kinda helps play into that variety aspect of it compared to Remake, is that in Remake, your party was designated for you up until literally, like, the very end, like, the post game. Or here, on the outset, you've got, what, 5 playable party members right at the outset. Well, not including, like, the Nibelheim flashback and the other things, but as soon as you're in the open world, you've got 5 playable party members, so you have a little bit of, literal choice and agency, to use, one of
I
Adam's favorite
love
words.
I love the feature that they did where you can just switch parties on the fly. With just like two buttons, you can switch to your party
Mhm.
members on the fly, out of the when you're roaming around. that like I switched to Tifa and Aerith as one party, and then Barret and Red as the other, and I switch between them pretty frequently because I like playing them. Like this game actually does like kind of the impossible. Where I actually super enjoy playing everyone. Aerith becomes enjoyable to me once you get her third weapon. Before that, it's kind of iffy, but everyone else up until that point is like super enjoyable. Like they're like Barret, I did not like playing Remake. He feels amazing to play in Rebirth with some of the changes that he got. Red is pretty fascinating, and what they did for his quirk in Rebirth. Where he has this vengeance mode as he blocks damage, but also just like generally good at like building up ATB really fast. It's like has really good abilities tied to his ATB. Tifa has always been fun to play as. But like the thing with Cloud and Tifa is like they have way more aerial like capability and mobility now. So like they're really fun to play like both on the ground and now have like proper aerial combo strings and maneuverability. And it's just the pace of combat in this game is so good. Like I don't think I can ever go back to remakes combat flow after Rebirth.
I,
It
I,
just
I do have one question though
uh
about Tifa's aerials, because I mean this might be just me being bad at games, but how do you get her into the air?
synergy. She has synergy skills that you can use with other party members, where like they launch her off their
Oh,
weapon.
okay, yeah, that's stuff. You're right. With Aerith, right? She does have a launcher.
I
Okay,
I
that
use that
I
means
also
reverse
want to
scale.
say I also
that
want to
means
say
I did not
once
use
you
synergy enough during that game.
yeah I also want to say I'm pretty sure if she has at least one charge of the onslaught, I think it's what it's called, the stuff that buffs her, she can do an uppercut, and if you dodge right after the uppercut, you can continue like attacking in the air. I'm pretty sure.
I
Yeah,
felt like I learned all the game mechanics from doing a Titan fight it over and over. I learned how synergy works, everything from that one fight alone because I keep dying to it.
I'm
You
gonna
know,
have to rewrite a couple of guides.
yeah, that definitely meant like experiment with like the synergy stuff because they become pretty handy with the way that like if you want to usually there's going to be a synergy of like that'll compensate for like a character's like like battle mobility. Like you said, Tifa getting the air is like kind of tough with her on her own, but like with synergy that can be compensated. Like if it comes to Aerith keeping Aerith protected, she actually has synergy to like for characters to like take the hits for her. So you could actually
Oh
like
yeah,
keep her
that
well
one was
well
good. That was fun.
yeah. So
it's like
that was pretty well regarded too.
and you also have like no MP at like the beginning of the game, so it's like if you get hurt, you're like, how do I heal myself? It's like, oh, I'll use that synergy ability. Now I have unlimited MP for like a minute, right? So there's lots
Mhm.
of cool things that you kind of learn
Yeah,
from
the synergy
doing.
stuff is really well implemented. Like the advances they made from intermission into rebirth, there's like the how synergy actually is fleshed out. It's like really fascinating. And it's kind of funny too. That like from intermission to rebirth, I was thinking like, how are they gonna solve the Yuffie problem? Because the Yuffie, I call it the Yuffie problem because Yuffie is so overpowered, intentionally so in intermission because she has the elemental imbues on her shuriken, so she can just like she is an elemental monster in intermission. It's like how are they gonna give like characters like that versatility? Like just Yuffie be inherently like be the best character over the others? And like the folio system actually compensates for this because as you're gaining like skill points, you can fill out this kind of like spear grid esque system that you can respec at any time, and you unlock new synergy abilities, skills, but also give each character access to a variety of elemental spells that they can do that don't spend MP and just cost ATB only instead. It's like, oh, okay, this is how they solve this problem by giving characters access to elements that they can just kind of cast for free to exploit elemental weaknesses on creatures to pressure them, and
Uh,
that's a really cool way to do it.
I think the only thing I would change from the synergy is the UI. It's kind of hard to read it. It looks like, oh, do I need 2 bars with that character? It's like, no, you need 3 bars, and I keep misreading the red,
The
for a
pips,
while.
yeah, the little pips could definitely use some work on that. Why
Oh,
it is kind of hard to read once you
yeah, it got
get
really
used to it.
confusing. It's like once I know, like, use it enough, it's like, oh, now I know why. It's like, why isn't this ability working? It's like that's why.
I guess for the topic, like this obviously extended to everyone, but I want to hear Josh too first on this. Like, when you came into this from remake to rebirth for the first time in terms of like the enhances the battle system, like I'm kind of curious, like what you felt about it. It's like for the first time, it's like, wow, this is the battle system, how it's expanded, and like tell me about that.
My initial, I kind of played Rebirth sort of a one and done. I
Mhm.
didn't really I didn't really dig too deep. In
Mhm.
fact, actually, that's kind of funny because for this review, I kind of played it to the hilt.
Oh, okay.
I by the time I was finished with the game, by the time I was finished, I'd gotten every world intel stuff. I'm not fully done with the hard mode. I haven't platinumed the game or anything, but I definitely kind of played as much of the game as I could play before I finished that review. Whereas compared to remake, I was just kind of okay. I think I'm not going to be doing too many challenges. I'm not going to bother too much with the summons. I don't think I earned. I mean, I was playing intergrade, and I don't think I earned Bahamut, and that sort of stuff in remake. But and the battle system is kind of part of that because before in remake it was interesting, but I wasn't feeling it too much. And in rebirth, it felt a lot better to um I mean, to just kind of mess around with all to have more party members, to have this extra stuff. It actually I played about half the time in what was it called, in classic mode,
Okay.
where you can have the characters on autopilot, on sort of autopilot, where they'll do their basic attacks, and they'll do their basic attacks automatically. They'll evade and block automatically. I mean, it's not foolproof. I mean, they don't really move the way you would necessarily want them to move. But for regular battles and for stuff that's not too complicated, you can just you only just have to focus on spending your ATB charges. In fact, and later on you can get materia that sort of does that for you for the back for if you'd prefer to just control one character at a time. So I think the battle system is much improved here, and as I mentioned, I haven't even fully unlocked all of its aspects. In fact, I haven't even discovered. I did not discover Tifa's anti-air capabilities as much as I should have or as I could have. So
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah, it's a
lot.
lot of depth. Yeah, to
Yeah,
learn.
there's a lot more to there's it feels I'm much more motivated to unpack that stuff now, as
Mhm.
opposed to remake where, oh, I see this battle system's kind of deep, but I'm not invested enough in it to really unpack it because I just want to see what happens with Sephiroth and whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
here, I feel more engaged with it, and that's cool.
Okay.
I don't remember, like, if how exactly it worked in Remake. I almost wanna kinda go back. I do remember the synergy abilities in Intergrade felt really kinda clunky to use, and they feel a lot more very just easy to use now. Like, I'm not sure if it's the UI or I'm not sure if it's the wind up time, but I just remember in Integrate, I didn't really like them, and I'm liking them a lot more here. Also, just the way this I do remember in Remake to some extent. The combos are slightly different if you like hold the button versus tap it, and then like for Cloud, that's doubly implemented on his like operator versus Punisher modes. So like Cloud in his operator mode, if you hold just the attack button, he will like lunge at an enemy, including towards the air. So that's like how he can get airborne. Or if he's on the ground, then you like swing right after a dodge. He has the new like aerial slashes, which is if you want to keep your distance, a nice alternative. So that's kind of like a new capability for him as well. And then one thing about both the immersion, kind of going back and looping back into Josh 2's original point with like partying or exploring with your party of friends is that regardless of which characters you bring with you in your actual battle party, like the other ones are always present. Now the other
Mhm.
ones, it's a little bit maybe goofy if you overanalyze it because the people that you don't have selected in your party will kind of be like crab walking around the perimeter of the battlefield. Like they'll be present, but there's like, why won't you come in and like it's trying to
I
have
mean,
them both
yeah,
there and not at the same time.
yeah. It looks like they're
Um,
participating. I'm sure just for appearance only, but just like to make it more believable that like
yeah,
you're
I'm
part
it's
of the group.
helping.
immersive.
They're
Yeah,
going
it's
and they
immersive,
shout
and
from the back. It's like I'm helping, and then
and then the nice thing, the fun
Barrett
thing
shoots
is
for like single digit damage and from the sideline.
Yeah.
and then, like, if you have, like, your 2 in-person party members down, you can do synergy abilities with your, like, backline. which is kind of a fun little thing. Like, oh, I need help, Barrett, come in. So it does have a little bit of that there, and not only that, but like when you're doing quests, each quest is assigned a particular party member, sure, but the other party members are present, and there's dialogue, there's emotion or kickback back and forth, um, and which is unlike in we talk about in remake one of the kind of gripes of that game is that it had quote unquote bad quests, and I know that's not that's not an axiom. Some people might think otherwise, but in Rebirth, the way the quests are improved is that it's not just limited to here's one chapter where I'm doing quests with Tifa in Sector 6, and then here's one quest with Aerith, where I'm doing all of her quests in Chapter 7. Like, it's the whole cast. It incorporates a lot more characters, new NPCs, old NPCs. It introduces a lot of them have kind of like mini bosses attached, where it's like, oh, this is an upgraded version of this, or sometimes it's not even like a recolored enemy. It's like a new enemy that's unique to that quest. Um, like there's a quest in I believe the Junon region where you meet Kyrie again, and it's kind of a fun quest. It's just like the dog escort. It has like its own little unique like battle track, and then it has like a mini boss at the end that doesn't really fight like any other boss in the area. For just kind of a little simple quest, and I forget even which character it's explicitly assigned to because the multiple characters are involved, and just having the whole cast
It's
present, and then of
red.
course,
Red was that one. I just did it
oh
yesterday.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
But just having the 5 party members initially, and then throughout the course of the game, you do get Yuffie, you do get, Kate Sith, Ketchi, whatever you wanna call it. Uh, and, Yuffie is treated like a full party member, like, she will get her own quest too. Ketchi is a little bit different. I guess I'll just, like, leave it at that. Like, he's a full party member in battle, but I think you get him too late for most of the quests to, like, interact with him completely. But they're all kind of incorporated into the party pretty well.
Yeah. I do appreciate that where like just most side quests just usually have one or multiple characters that like at the end of it's like it'll show you like your relationship with this person has changed or has increased,
Mm.
whatever. It's just a nice little touch of like, you're kind of building your bond with party members over time by
Oh, I
engaging
also
with
found
sides.
another. Sorry, I
Mhm,
don't know if I
yeah,
got the end of your sentence, but
go for it.
there's another little fun attention to detail. This really isn't that consequential, but I really enjoy that they did this. So Kyrie is involved in one side quest in the first area in the grasslands, and she's involved in later side quests like the tower in the Junon region in the next area. When I was replaying the game through some chapter select, I was doing some of the quests out of order. And because she was present in a later area, I go back to do the quest in the initial area, and instead of being Kyrie, it was like I think a Moogle doll with her hat. And she's like, "I'm sorry, I was double booked, but here, can you please do this for me?" So the game actually like took account for like we don't want this character to appear in 2 places at once. So if you do the quest in order, in linearly as you go through the game, then you won't run into that. But if you go back, because you eventually you do unlock, like when you're in the second region, you do the chocobo quest there, you can then ride them back to the first area. So you always have the option. There's really no missables in this game, even prior to chapter select, because you can always go back to the previous area in some fashion. And when you do that, it takes account for which characters might no longer be in that area and moved on. So it's a little just tiny attention to detail that I'm glad they
Yeah.
did, rather than having it just be like, oh, it's a game, don't worry about it.
One tiny little attention to detail that I just ran into earlier today was I'm in the narrative segment of the Junon region up until like the march that they showed off in trailers. During that march, you do get a uniform change, and I was like, oh, I forgot to do the Phoenix summon battle. Let me go do that right now because you meet Chadley at some part of it, and like it reflected like the uniform changes that some of my characters underwent during that fight. I'm like, oh, I love that actually. So I just have like Barrett in this goofy uniform during that fight. I'm like, oh, this is lovely. This is awesome actually. So it's just like little stuff like that in the game. That's like that it counts for like you did this like in like a weird order, but like we'll let it rock. And that's awesome. And also just around that segment of like you know of how the things that you do up until that march is like there's like little dialogue and like for 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 that section on other NPCs that like I just like really like that I like that just it just kind of fleshes it out like in a really awesome new way that's like, oh, that's really cool that like they kind of characterize these people that like you'll never think about again after this segment, but in the moment you're just like, that's cool that they had like little small conversations, and I think that's reflected around like gonna be reflected about like every part about this game, like just attention to detail, like NPC conversation and interaction. Like in the starting town of Calm, you see like if you notice it, like you'll see some characters having a slap fight. You'll run across this like kind of like not comedian, but kind of like this drama actor at some part of Calm talking about like his life story or something like that. And it's just like you just see like just like weird things that NPCs are doing. You're just like, cool, that's awesome that they did that.
The NPC chatter is actually pretty well done, and my most recent point in comparison is Infinite Wealth. Because in
Uh-huh.
that game, if you're like running around that Anaconda Mall, you hear like the same 2 or 3 lines
Yeah,
over and
yeah.
over again. Or you'll hear like the same male voice go like, "Time for another vacation," or whatever they say. Or the goons will say like, "This ain't a show, shithead." But in this, so you hear the same where it kind of loses. It ends up feeling like a video game because there's not enough variety in the lines. Where here, there's like bespoke conversations where like there'll be uh just meet 2 characters. I think it's 2 ladies that you meet in the crow's nest area,
Mm.
in the grasslands, and they like I forget if it's implied or explicit, but they like start dating, and you see them like throughout the rest of the areas. Or you can just hear people talk about like the ships coming into port at Costa del Sol. Like there's a lot of variety. Like if you just wander around, like I almost think one thing would be kind of an interesting video to make is ignoring the main story, just going around town and like recording all the idle NPC conversations that happen. Just because there's a good variety to them, and this is kind of leading up to my thesis. And I kind of touched on this last week, but this is the first game that really makes me feel that Square has nailed HD towns. It's kind of touched it before in like 13.2 and a little bit in 15 and 16, but the sheer variety and locations in just how much happens in each, how much there is to do in each location. They're not just setting dressing. It
Mhm.
just makes me feel like, and coming as I think we've all played the original Final Fantasy VII. My understanding is that we've all played it when we were young, with the exception of James, who played it between Remake and Rebirth. Um, and just seeing like all these areas get fully realized and with plenty to do. Like you go to Costa del Sol and there's a million things to do. Maybe in Under Junon there's not quite as much, but they flesh out the characters that are there. Like the mayor character, I believe she's an original character. I don't remember if she has a
I
name
think
in the
she I
original
think she is
game.
OG, I believe.
And
Yeah.
then Priscilla was the child character. She's from the original game, and she's fleshed out a little bit. And I do think, like, when they had to add NPCs to this game, they did I can't point my finger on why, but they just feel a lot more realized. Like, I'm trying to think of the different characters that are asked you to, like, go into the random warehouse in Remake, and I barely remember what they look like or who they are or what their names were. But I'm like, oh yeah, Rhonda, the mayor of Under Junon, or Broden, the ex-soldier like innkeeper that you meet. Like the NPCs that they add, we're not running into Leslie trying to find the ring of his unnamed dead fiance
That
in
was
this
a low
game.
point. That was a low point, gotta say.
Yeah. So this when the areas where they do flesh out this game, they do it a lot. It feels a lot more natural now rather than like padding. It doesn't feel like padding in Rebirth. When it
It
felt kind of like
feels
padding.
more personal because they take into account the state of like where the story is at. Like Broden and Rhonda, for example, they know that like you're Avalanche. Rhonda is
Mhm.
funny because like she looks at her tablet and she looks at the bounties of your characters, and that makes her a memorable character just by that like little actions. Because like no other NPC in the world, as far as I have in the fucking story right now, like does that, and that what makes her memorable is through that little interaction with Broden. Very very early on, like he's the one telling you to get into the basement. He's like, and I always remember the line of Broden was like, I hope this isn't like the worst mistake I'm doing in my life now, um, and you learn a little bit more about Broden through side quest lines later on in that and it's like that's kind of like just like these little touches that kind of makes these characters way more realized than they probably should. But it's just like that leaves a mark on your playthrough. Just engaging with these characters, and
And then
that's
one character you meet on early is Billy from the Choco Ranch, who's also
yeah.
a returning character. And without spoiling anything else, like Billy will show up multiple times throughout the game. And is he a major character? No, but it just helps. It just helps the world feel more developed. It's not just like, oh, this person is only present for chapter 2 and then they're gone because that was the role in the game. It's like, no, they'll show back up, and of course they would, because
They come in all varieties too, because like it's like it gets goofy. Like for example, because I am a Queen's Blood fiend in this game. I'm a
It's a
blood
great
acolyte.
card game.
I'm a blood acolyte right now. Okay, and one of the people that like you go up to in the crow's nest is like they're part of this Queen's Blood committee group, and like their mission is to like to establish peace talks with Shinra through card games. that's what the fuck? I'm like, hell yeah. You know what? Sign me up. Let's fucking play.
I find all like the people that you challenge in Queen's Blood are like eccentric in some way. There's
Yeah.
Crybaby Ned, who's like constantly crying.
It's like, oh no. You
I'll
know?
be honest, I lost to Crybaby Net a few times.
You did?
Yep.
Okay.
That's fine, but
Uh,
that's fine. Like, it's very easy to retry and like think about your
Yeah.
strategy, that's the kind of the nice thing about like Queen's Blood, where it's like, even if you're not too great with card games, you know, you can like kind of like stick to like you'll find like some cards that like you are generally powerful that you cling to, and like you can kind of brute force it because it's inherently powerful that Cloud always gets the first and the Queen's Blood
mhm.
matches. As far as I like, I don't know if that changes, but right now, as I'm going through the storyline, like you'll be fine. Like you know, it's not like the most complicated card game. It's simple and like tactical enough that you'll generally have a good time of like just kind of learning it and like figuring out your go-to strategies of like what's effective. So like that game is like that card game. They've kind of struck gold with Seeds Blood for me. Where I'm like, the first thing I do when I go to a new time is I go to the item store. I buy all the booster packs. I'm down bad. That's majority of my guild so far has been buying booster packs for that fucking card game.
Damn.
Yep.
You should tell Square Enix to make a real Queen's Blood official game.
Man, that would do. It'd be a nightmare for me. I don't know. I could see myself getting super addicted to it. So, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I mentioned this I think I mentioned this on the last podcast. My only gripe with Queen's Blood is that there's just almost not enough of it, because
Mhm.
each area will have like 2 or 3 people you can play. Then when you get to the Gold Saucer, there's a little bit more you can do, and in Costa del Sol, there's a little bit more you can do. It sounds like I'm being like greedy, and maybe I am, because it's like there's plenty of Queen's Blood stuff, but I just almost wish there was more. And of course, I have to do this. I'm sorry, guys. The natural point of comparison is Triple Triad.
Mhm.
And I do think, this is off the cuff, I do think that both games have, like, a similar level of, like, the collection aspect to it, the mechanical, like, the strategy aspect to it. The one area that I do think that Triple Triad does still edge it out is that it interfaces a little bit more directly in the main game, where Queen's
Yeah, I
Blood is
mean,
kind of
Triple Triad is
segregated
the
into
main
its own
reason
thing.
you can get the Squall's best weapon in the first disc of
Mhm.
FF8, because if you become a Triple Triad fiend, you can make your way to that, because you get a better payout of like what you need on like gameplay wise than like Queen's Blood. Where it's kind of just you kind of do it for fun for the most part. You're not really missing out too much by not engaging in Queen's Blood, except like a pretty like goofy characters and a storyline attached to it. Um, but yeah, but you're kind of just playing it for fun. With Queen's Blood Bond and Triple Triad, you can break the game wide open if you really want to, which is something you can't do with King's Blood for this
Yeah,
game.
you know, the one aspect of this game, I'm gonna make a point of comparison, is that there's also it's a much smaller little mini game, but the piano playing, you
Hmm.
get, I think, like 6 or 7 or 8 songs throughout the course of the game, and as you score high enough in each of the songs, you can kind of get credit for it and get materia and I think some accessories to trade in. I just kinda wish that maybe Queen's Blood had a similar thing where it's like, "Oh, there's something like 150 cards." Like, "Oh, you've collected 50 cards, you get this. Oh, 100, you get this. Oh, 125." Like,
Yeah, that's a
I
good
think
point.
even something like that would have been, like, a little bit incentive, like, "Oh, you can get the haste materia super early if you do queens," or some
That'd
maybe,
be so
but
sick.
that's this is me, like, nitpicking. I just really enjoyed it, but once you kinda beat everyone, there's no card mod or anything like that in terms of, like, getting extra easy resources or items, but it's still really fun, and I do think it's something that they could flesh out on in the sequel, part 3, or Pie in the Sky, maybe its own thing, or a separate thing, or a mobile thing, or whatever they wanna do with it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do wonder if they decide to like kind of make a spin off of it in the future. If they like once they hear like the universal positive reception in Blood, I think for people who engage in it, like there's been nothing but like praise for it. Obviously, if you're not into card games, obviously not for that's fine. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit because I need to hear Chow on this. This will be spoilers for like the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game after soon as you hit U game on this. Chow, when you first got to move in FF7 Rebirth, what was going through your mind? Like the first character that you got to move around with in this game as soon as you hit U game.
With Zach, are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's what he was teeing you up for. Yes.
Yes.
What is the first thing that comes to my mind? Is everyone dead? Because it's like, okay, the reason is like I was like, okay, you crashed the helicopter. It's like, good going, Red. You know, you crashed the helicopter. It's like you gotta get everyone get inside killed, okay? But,
Yeah,
okay.
it was a fucking weird moment because it tees off of like the ending of remake and intermission of like the of like that scene of Zack carrying an unconscious Cloud all the way to Midgard, and then in another scene it's like Cloud and Aerith walking the other way, kind of maybe teeing up for like different timelines. Who knows? I don't know. Um, but then like when Cloud gets to Midgard, it's like after like the plate and like the Shinra building has like collapsed but it shows all the party members that you had in remake like all dead being shipped out into Shinra helicopter, and you're seeing this with the eyes of Zack, like like carrying like a comatose Cloud pretty much on his back, and you're just like, what the fuck is happening? And then the game's like, hey, by the way, go play as Zack during this opening segment, and you're like,
Yeah, go rescue Aerith, who's kind of
huh?
like you don't know if she's dead or in a coma, and yeah, this is all within the first 5 minutes.
You're like, I'm like, what the fuck? It was that's a
It's
pretty.
intriguing, you know, definitely.
It's definitely one hell to start the game, where like you're just like like anyone who knows FF7 is like kind of losing their minds at this point. Like you're just like, huh? I respect the way that they start this game, where you're just like kind of thrown out of the loop immediately. You're just like you think you know what's gonna be the start, and then you're just like, no. I thought like the start of the game would be like the Nibelheim flashback.
Well, they did say that wasn't going to be the first segment, but did you transfer your demo save data, or did you just replay that part again?
So, from what I understand from people who played it, there is like you do have to still play a little bit of the Nibelheim flashback, but
yeah, I did that.
Yeah,
I chose to skip it because I was like, if I skip, I have more
skip it.
time to get further in the game, right?
Yeah. So, but thankfully, like everything, I apparently on my PS5 had a save for remake, intermission, and then of course that saved the demo save data. So I was able to get all the goodies right away. I totally forgot that I had saves for them on PS5.
You know what's so stupid
What?
about those things? Okay, I have all the DLC, all the bonus, but I didn't know how to access it until like I'm in Junon because
Nice.
I was like, it's not in my inventory. It's like, is it in my closet? It's like I don't have a closet. I'm like, it's like, where's my RAM with some material? I know I have it. I'm like, I had to Google it. Sorry, guys.
Oh, you have to Google. You needed a guide for that. Okay, that's guide potential right there. How do I get my fucking stupid bonuses?
It doesn't explain it too
It
well. I
doesn't-
didn't know
it
it was
doesn't
hidden in
explain
like a system menu or some shit.
That's
so.
fine. I think they briefly like put a light in it after you retrieve it from the main menu, but even then, I'm sure it's easily missable. I also got access to it immediately. But yeah, I'm just really looking forward to like playing more of it. Like after this podcast is done, I'm gonna immediately play more of it. I'm 21 hours in. I'm hoping to finish this before Unicorn Overlord next week.
Best of luck.
You got 2 days.
Wait, 2 days? What? No, Unicorn's not out till like the 8th, I think, right?
Yeah, it's 6
You can
days.
play a demo. You can play a demo to get a 7-hour head start. I guess.
I mean, look, I
Demo's
won't worry
already
about the I won't worry about the demo until I'm done with this game. That's where I'm at. I'm fiending over this game right now, though.
Yeah, I love it too. Like I'm like earlier I said about that Ubisoft remark. That isn't from me. I am having a blast with this game. I feel like, if Genshin isn't even half as good as that open world as this, and yeah, it's making billions. It's like I'm already sold on this.
I'm just glad that like the open worlds, because it's like multiple open worlds per region. I'm just glad that like they're not too massive, so like you can kind of traverse them. I do know that there are some open world regions later on that people have been talking about that are a pain in the ass to like navigate. So I'll get there when I get there and see how it is. Like I do like I already don't like how slow the chocobos in the Junon region. The new chocobo thing is like they can climb up like marked surfaces, and then like that already takes too long for some of it, and it's kind of annoying.
Like I
Um,
like in my opinions, like I don't really mind doing the open world thing. I think
mhm.
the thing that just takes me out of the immersion from the lore is like we have to go to the march to do this, but no, I'm gonna do like a million other side quests first. It's like it doesn't feel kind of accurate because
Yeah, they do. It's kind of the open world. I mean, it's kind of not even just open world. This is like an overall RPG problem that like they kind of have to like you have to kind of concede to. Of like, there's this like really urgent thing that we have to go do, but then there's like a whole shitload of other things like optional things you can engage with,
I
right?
think I think even the character kind of makes snark at you. It's like, man, you guys sure have a lot of free time or something like that.
Yeah, they have really good chemistry, and I really like a lot of the conversations, the exchanges between the characters. I really like Red a lot. Surprisingly, in this game, I didn't think I would think much of Red. I don't know why, but Red
I
has
think
been
it's
awesome.
the original FF7 doesn't give you much of an impression. He has like that one awesome scene where he meets like like the corpse of his father in the
Yeah,
original, but
yeah,
other than that, you don't really remember the character much because he doesn't talk that much, in my opinion.
yeah.
So maybe this time is like he's more fleshed out, so you're more connected with him now,
You do
right?
have a different spin on Red because of like the remake nature of it, where Red's characterization is more in tune with the remake nature of this trilogy. So that gives them a different angle on how to characterize
Okay,
Red.
if you've played Remake, which we're kind of making the assumption that everyone talking about
I
Rebirth
mean,
has played Remake.
yeah,
It's
I have
Red
to.
and Aerith, yeah, and I think that's fair. And Red and Aerith are both kind of paired in that same way that they're like they have a natural kind of I don't know, affinity towards the planet. So that's in the live stream, which kind of is used to explain why they have some feelings or premonitions about things. And then some of that is explained a little bit early on in Rebirth, compared to what the status was in Remake. And I won't go any more detail than that. But yeah, it does give Red a little bit more kind of importance and focus in the story, especially with the events at Cosmo Canyon later.
Yeah, I
And
can't wait for
then
that.
yeah, Kate Sith, Ketchi. Still a little bit of a minor character, but he does get a lot more chance to shine in Rebirth. Um, and his interaction with Shinra and the Gold Saucer,
Mhm.
and this sounds a little bit silly, but maybe it's because I was very young at the time. But like at the time when I was playing Final Fantasy VII, I almost like my brain didn't parse that it was a cat on a Moogle doll. I thought it was like all one thing. So like Kit Chi gets plenty of time in this game where you just play as the cat and like the Moogle doll you summon into battle. And it's actually kind of interesting because like you can summon the doll and then you can like split off from it and basically the doll can take aggro and kind of act a little bit autonomously. Just like your other party members, it doesn't really do a whole lot on its own, but it's still just like a neat little wrinkle for how Ketchi's character works.
Yeah, I'm
And then
really
one
looking
thing
forward to
that
seeing that in action and playing it for myself. Like I'm very interested.
Ketchi does have the thing that this is a trope in a lot of RPGs, especially Japanese RPGs. The trickster character, the Joker character, where a lot of their abilities rely on RNG, and like if his limit break in the original was sluts, I believe, so that's not new. But a lot of the things are just like, here's an attack called Fortune Teller. It will either do low damage, high damage, or no damage, and you're like, well, I'm not going to use that ability. But he does get bonuses where like he gets extra luck if he's on his Moogle, so there might be ways to like mitigate that. But it makes me a little bit less inclined to use them if there's RNG baked into his design. I'm like, oh,
For what
But
it's
one thing you
worth,
can't.
I've never gone wrong with fortune telling. It's actually Ketchi's built like a caster, but he's got like the stats of a fighter. So if you've got high enough luck with that guy, you can just do the fortune telling, and then the boss just dies.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I look at
I
like the
I'll
think
luck
try
of
luck.
that.
I think
materia.
luck is big on
Yeah,
for Ket and for Yuffie. Luck is pretty. I don't know if it's important, but luck has a much bigger. It seems to have a bigger effect on those two. Because
interesting.
Yuffie has a few weapon skills that
Mhm.
give her. I mean, and also a few folio nodes that give her bonuses if she's able to successfully steal.
Okay.
So she's got a few things where you'll want to keep the steel materia on her. And for Ket, you can play him kind of like a melee fighter, but he's also got the build of a caster. So you can kind of go both ways on that with him.
Mm.
And his
I still think Yuffie is so incredibly versatile because
oh
of the
yeah,
ninjutsu.
definitely.
Like, she can
Yeah.
access any element affinity without the materia attached. She can attack from range. She's like 100% effective from range. And then she has an ability that you get pretty early on. I think it's like her third weapon, fourth weapon, called Blindside, where she throws the shuriken and like it basically for smaller enemies, it's stagger, not stagger in terms of the mechanic in the game, but it knocks them off their feet, and that way, like everyone else can just wail on them. And you can do blindside even with Yuffie's being knocked in the air. She can do it while airborne or while being knocked back. And if you have enough like ATB building material on her, she can just spam the crap out of that. And you can do it with the proper element as well. So she's basically, once I got her, she never left my party. And then, like you said, Josh, Red is also just really interesting to use and fits well with a lot of his. He kind of has a play style that kind of meshes both Cloud and Tifa's, sort of, but with the counter, like the counter stance, Sentinel
Yeah.
stance, uh, slant to it. So yeah, I'm eager to see, of course, the question is there you've got a few more characters to implement for part 3, exactly how those are gonna
They need more party
be
slots.
implemented.
That's what I think. Not party slots in terms of like participating characters, but they need more like how you can switch between different parties and it's
Mhm.
like up to 3. I think they need more of those. To be
Yeah.
honest, I'm
I
like
also wish they had like material loadouts because you have to reassign material manually each time. There's no material loadout. That would
yeah,
be a very
yeah.
interesting QL change. I do. There's one topic that we haven't quite discussed yet that I'm eager
Yeah.
to see people's thoughts on. We'll start again with Josh too. Josh, this game has a lot of mini games, and we kind of touched on it earlier when Josh one said he didn't do the frog thing.
I
Touch
did
on
the
your
frog. I
time
did
with
the frog
the
thing, but I didn't do the 3-star or frog thing. I did like up to 2 stars. That I'm like, I don't have the patience to do this all the way. Yeah, go for
Yeah,
it.
on mini games. That's kind of what I'm referring to when I say when I and some others have said it's got the soul of 1997. Like before open worlds were really a thing, or before open worlds were a thing that everyone was trying to do in the AAA space. What AAA meant for games in 1997 was you put a lot of money into doing just things you will do, like making up a bunch of interactions, a bunch of quasi quote unquote cinematic actions that you might only do once, or you spend a bunch of money on like um putting it in retrospect, like someone mentioned once, someone kind of did a breakdown of how graphically complicated one mini scene was from like Final Fantasy 8, where you've got this Galbaldian soldier running after you guys in a train, and they broke down all the kinds of graphical tricks that you had to do to just get this one scene of a soldier getting really tired after trying to run after a train with you on it. And it's kind of like that, like that's the soul of 97, 98, where you're putting a lot of weird dev time into like chocobo racing, into snowboarding, um like into stuff that, well, to put it cynically, into stuff that can't be monetized, and or that doesn't look as good on the back of a box, as a bullet point in your sales. And that's kind of where it comes in. Like there's a mini game here where you have to figure out how to properly pick a mushroom, and there's a mini game where um you use a can to get a chicken to follow you around, um stuff like that. And then like that
There's a mini
Junon.
game in Costa del Sol that I was not expecting at all. This game has its own micro version of Rocket League in it. Maybe I shouldn't say more than that, but
Okay.
they just said we're just gonna do this, and then they
I
did
think,
this.
yeah, I think there was a clip of it in like a trailer or something.
Well, I'm pretty sure there's been clips of everything in this game
Yeah.
in a trailer.
I'm sure
But
they spoiled everything on
Red
those trailers
13
by now.
League.
But yeah, you go to Costa del Sol, which is, everyone kind of expected you go to the Gold Saucer eventually, and there'd be tons of mini games, and a lot of them return, and there are new ones. There is no in the original game. There's like a basketball shooting little mini game that's not in here, but now we have like the 3D brawler. The bike mini game I think is a carryover. Of course, it's implemented slightly differently. Queen's Blood has a big role in Costa del Sol in Gold Saucer, but even in Costa del Sol, there's like one of those like
The
festival
challenge
arcade
stand, yeah.
amusement park like first person target challenges. And there's also like this one kind of feels a little bit more natural in getting up into Upper Junon. You do the interaction with the dolphin. Of course,
Yeah.
that becomes its own mini game. And then there's this one area where everyone turns into the toad, like the toad form. I
Mhm.
remember that was a big marketing thing for a remake. I think it was the Apsu fight. You could turn into a toad, and it was like we're gonna reveal Apsu, Ifrit, and then also the toad form of Cloud, and that was the marketing at the time. And then there's an area here where it's like everyone becomes a toad, and then you got to do a mini game as a toad. And like,
I won't
oh,
say like the context of like how this Toad thing manifested, but like I the storyline up to reveal like that how that Toad mini game comes to be in Rebirth is like it's like so absurd that I'm like, what the fuck is this game? It is so weird and funny at like the most unexpected ways sometimes. And that just caught me off guard, like the way that they introduced that mini game, like the storyline up to it. It's just like, what the fuck?
and then talking about mini games and variety, the one thing that helps keep the variety from location to location, one, we did talk about the chocobos. They work a slightly differently in each region. So this game doesn't have like the chocobo breeding, but it does say like in the Junon region, they're mountain chocobos, so they can climb up and down walls. In a later region, they have this silly ability to like water jet geyser over bodies of water, which is a bit silly, but then
I
there's some gameplay involved in it.
I I love how like multiple people made like an edit of that one comic where it's
A
like,
very
hey,
silly.
can you
Yeah, go ahead.
see how hard I can pee? And it's like just replaced it with the chocobo.
Uh, but also each area, like there's different sorts of things that you do in each area. Obviously, there's the towers. There's each area has a summon that you have to do a little mini game to be able to access. There's the enemy intel, which is like usually they're kind of modifications of enemies you would naturally find in the region, but they're slightly powered up. But then there's also the proto relic quest, which is like a world spanning side quest that in each area is implemented a little bit differently. In the first area, it's like story scenes involving some characters from the Wall Market area from Midgar, and then in the second area, it's a mini game. It's Fort Condor. Like that's how Fort Condor is implemented from Intergrade into Rebirth. And then in each area, the proto relic, like what you actually have to do, is slightly different. In some, it's literally a mini game that has like a hard mode attached, and you can get rewards for. And then in some, it's like a different sort of battle arena. So there's a little bit of variety there. And then it also has the normal like completionist, serotonin or whatever you want to call it, where you build up towards like a climax. And that's kind of like the major side quest of the game is doing the proto relics in each area and seeing how that all concludes. So if you're not wanting to be 100% completionist, I do suggest doing the proto relics just because it ends up leading to like some of the coolest optional content in the game. But yeah, mini games are good. I enjoyed all of them. I especially enjoyed like I think they're tuned really well in terms of challenge. Like some of them, I just thought just as soon as I thought this is way too hard, I'll never do it. I ended up finding a strategy to implement to win. In one of the later regions, they're like chocobo gliding courses, which I think might be some of my favorite in the game that were not too difficult and not too frustrating. My least favorite is probably what they introduced in the um, the proto relics in the Cosmo region with the uh, Gears and Gizmos minigame. That one was a bit strange.
I also don't like how what they did with Fort Condor. I like Fort Condor better in remake.
It was better in Intergrade, yeah. And in this one, I think it's pared down just because it's only in one area of the game. So you can't really like control your loadout. You only have to pick, you can only pick from a select loadout. But yeah, it does feel like a downgrade compared to its implementation in Intergrade.
I think the timers on some of the mini games, like gears and like the gears and gadgets, that's what it's called. That's where
Gears and
gambits come
Gambits.
back. Yes, gears and gambits, right? Um, um, and in Fort Condor, a bit too harsh if you ask me on normal, but so I can't even imagine right now trying to bang my head against the hard mode on that. But yeah, but like I think it would be those would be more tolerable if the timers were a bit more forgiving. So kind of hoping they maybe I don't know if they're inclined to do a bit of a balance pass on some of that
I
stuff.
s-
The other
I
bit.
saw someone say, I haven't verified this myself, but like if you play literally on the easy mode difficulty, the mini games do get easier. I haven't
Oh,
confirmed
I'm
that
gonna have to
myself, but
try that.
someone said in Fort Condor they this is unverified, but your rate at which you can spawn units is increased in easy mode. So maybe potentially that'd be a smart way to implement that. Easy mode is not just combat easiness, but also ability to clear those. Like if you only just want to see how the proto relic quest turns out, and you don't really want to involve yourself in the mini game other than what you have to, that'd be a nice compromise there, I think. But in general,
Speaking,
like,
go
go
for
ahead,
it.
Josh.
Yeah, no,
I
I
was
was
just
gonna. Yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say, making the comparison to Infinite Wealth again, where in Infinite Wealth is this thing where it's like you could do the story, but also here's 3 or 4 or 5 things you can use to distract yourself for a time. And Final Fantasy VII does the same thing, and I never really felt mad at it for it. Like I was always very eager to like allow myself just to play Rocket League or do catch up on Queen's Blood or
Yeah,
all these
to
things
me, it
before
doesn't feel like a
pivoting or
chore.
something like
Yeah,
this. No, it doesn't.
yeah. I was gonna say, like, speaking of like settings in this game, like, I know it's kind of in the nitty gritty, but to me, I was just kind of surprised like how many settings they let you tweak in this game in terms of like camera adjustment during battle. I especially like the one where like you can switch the targeting of how you lock onto enemies. So like instead of the right stick, you can put it to the D-pad instead and have it do an auto camera. So like if you're in the air, there's like an adjustment for like when you're locked into an aerial enemy, keep that enemy centered on the battle in your camera no matter what. So like even if you evade, it will not go off screen when you evade, and you have to adjust for the camera. It'll keep it like the camera like focused on that enemy. There's like little things like um where you when you're doing basic attacks in battle, there's like a fixed and free mode where like if it's fixed, it'll keep like your combos squarely on that enemy and like it feels stiff. While like in free mode, like if you tilt like the left stick to like the direction of another enemy, you'll continue that combo and like into that enemy and not be so strict onto like the original enemy that you were originally targeting. It's just like little settings like that in the game that like you can tweak it to like the way that you want to. It like it's like a big thing for me where like something will feel off in combat and I'm like I wonder if there's a setting for that. And more often than not there is, and like combat feels really good now after tweaking around settings. And also just like terrain actions in the game, you can actually like set a marker that like it'll by your feet it'll like show like a little like white shade in the direction of like hey you're at a on a you're going up against a thing where you can do a terrain action, which just basically means you can go up this or go down or descend this, and like just little markers that like that saying like oh there's like a thing you can like actually like go jump off of, instead of like just mashing circle like aimlessly be like okay like can I go terrain action here, can I do this here. It's like oh there's actually like a setting in the game that like will show you the indicator so you don't look like a fucking idiot trying to like jump up and down anywhere you can trying to reach a certain thing. So it's just for me, I really like the expanding settings modes. As weird as that sounds in this game, it's like there's just got a lot of really smart improvements that like there's a lot of smart and like foreseeing of like how players want to engage with the game. I guess is the way I want to. It's like okay, some people might be like say I think this is a thing in the first game. I forgot if it was, but like if you're like going from like Granblue Relink into this game and you're used to like uh L1 on guard and R1 to like hold down to like use a skill, you can actually swap L1 and R1's functions in this game. And I forgot if that was in the first game or not. But like if you're just going from Granblue Relink into this game and you're still used to Granblue Relink's control scheme, you might want to do that. Yeah, well,
What was the skills called when you hold R1 and you start using the skill? It's a different type of skill. I forgot what they're called.
they're just like your weapon skills and FF7. Like in Granblue, I forgot what the skills were called, but like the arts or whatever.
Yeah, but I'm just like in FF7 Rebirth, I could have sworn L1 is your weapon skill and R1's like kind of like these synergy skills or something.
Yeah, R1 normally is mapped to like blocking, and then when you're blocking, you have access to synergy skills. And L1 would be you use that as like your weapon shortcut, your weapon skill shortcut.
Yeah, L1 you can shortcut to a lot of things, but yeah, your other abilities.
Yeah, and then you can actually swap them so like they have the reverse of the other triggers function because that's how it works in Relink, where you guard with L1 and R1 is what you hold down in Relink to gain access to your skills in there.
Well, I think we've touched on. I guess the only thing we really haven't touched on is something we've been deliberately kind of avoiding. We've talked about like character interactions. We talked about the quests. We haven't really talked about the overall story, but I don't know if there's a lot we can say in a spoiler-free context. Other
Mhm.
than for the most part, it does. If you've played the original game and you're not interested in the Whisper storyline, like the Whisper storyline is followed up on in this game. Like make no doubt about it. But it does allow a lot of the original moments to breathe. You will see the same events in Barrett revisiting his town of Coral, in the Gold Saucer, Cosmo Canyon with Red and Bugenhagen. Like those events are reimagined in a way that I think is really quite. I'll say quite faithful, but it is different. I know some people have already kind of compared like what's said in the original game, and obviously the original game you have the additional caveat of the original translation not being always up to par. So people comparing the order of the events as shown in the original game versus in remake, ignoring like regardless of the Whisper storyline. So the events in those locations do play out slightly differently. I haven't quite compartmentalized whether it's better or worse or just the same but different, just different but equally good. But for the most part, this game's main story does kind of take a back seat until like the last handful of hours, which is kind of faithful to the original game. In the original game, after the events at Midgar, it's basically like world tour, find and follow Sephiroth, and that's kind of the same here, where you'll kind of go from region to region with only the slightest amount of motivation to go to a certain area. Like for instance, I'm gonna say this very generically. When you're in Cosmo Canyon, you run into a character that mentions the word Nibelheim, and then the party's like, "We should go to Nibelheim," and then you go there. Like that's kind of like the sort of motivation that you get, like in terms of the main narrative thrust takes a back seat, which I think works okay for this style of game, but it is a little bit different compared to Remake, where the main story was kind of at the forefront pretty much completely all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like the current story beat that I've had with those spoilers, like the main reason is like we're following the guys in black robes. It's like okay, good, great.
And I'll be honest, when you say that could describe about half the game. Like,
Yeah,
oh well, what part are you following the guys in black robes? Like the first, the second, or the third time. And I don't say that with really a ton of judgment because I don't think the game really needs a much stronger narrative pull than that because the moment to moment character interactions are so strong. And
yeah,
it's kind of I also have the mindset that like, oh, that's just how it always was since 1997. So I kind of have that additional kind of substantiation in my head. Like, of course that's what it's like because that's what it's always been like.
yeah. I think they've done a really, really, really good job so far of like getting like how do you modernize and present like the second part of this trilogy because this is but if you're going by the original standards this kind of if you're going by the original, this is the part of the game where it's kind of the most main story narratively weak. Not to say that the character interactions and characters and like exploring the world and seeing and what you're doing on a day like moment to moment basis is bad. It's just like if you're just kind of compartmentalizing of like where the main story was best at. Like this is the part of the original where it was like at its weakest, where you're kind of you're kind of going through the motions.
Does anyone else have any other final thoughts? I guess I'll hand it off to Josh too first. Concluding thoughts on your time with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
I had a lot of fun. um, but yeah, definitely. I mean, I obviously don't want to talk about it now. We have a bit of insight as to where most folks who've started the game are, and I'm actually kind of trying to be a bit more judicious about the screenshots I share and stuff. Just not to spoil anyone by accident. But um there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and in like the narrative flow isn't always there, as I mentioned in the reviews. Like, if you are not already kind of in from how remake did things, and if you're not sort of invested, there is sort of a risk that you might be lost by not having much pull except follow the guys in the black robes. But by the time but like the moment to moment stuff is it's so good that you kind of forget that you're not really doing too much in a narrative sense, in a story, in a main story sort of sense. But when all that stuff comes down, I mean, when you get into the final few hours, um it gets much more uh serious isn't the right word, but I mean, that stuff comes back to the fore. And it and kind of excited to see if they can land this beast in the next one, and to see if that's all really gonna be worth it. Or, I mean, worth it's the wrong word, but like, if they're gonna make it pay off really. Like, as a whole on the remake project, I'm not 100% convinced that it was like super additive, but nevertheless, I've so far enjoyed my time with all of this, seeing it. So even if they don't quite make it pay off, if people who really super care about that story um can't say it's worth it at the end, I'm not sure. But like, yeah, I mean, like, if it's been a good run so far, and so I'm pretty excited to see what they can do next, and hopefully it won't take too much longer
I
to
think
to
I think
to
either way we
get
all benefit, right? Like whether it
to get
was worth
remake
the
3 out, I guess.
whether like it was worth it or not, I think is not really the right question. I think the question is like, did they
Yeah.
make enjoyable experiences on the way there? And I think they have. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm really
definitely.
thankful. I'm really thankful that like whether this has the perfect landing or not in its final installment, that matters to me less so than just like giving me a good game on the way there. Like, I'm just thankful that like they were able to do this project and like it came out as well as it did.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. It's like, I can't imagine anyone else getting this kind of chance, honestly, if it wasn't Final Fantasy VII.
yeah.
There are plenty of story beats for those that haven't played the original game that are teed up in Rebirth that aren't followed up until later. It would be in eventually in part 3, and especially with how Rebirth has changed things with regards to certain characters. I Basically, I have no idea what they're going to do. There's a lot of area to speculate exactly what they're going to do with those sorts of things. Um, but that's pretty much all I can say right now until we go into like a spoiler allowed context there. So, and I do know, like, actually I don't know. I was last time we had the last time we were able to talk about remake, we had George on the cast, who was basically our perspective of the newcomer, which we don't quite really have that right now. So I am eager to kind of continue to read what people who haven't played the original game do think about the story. I don't want to say cliffhangers, but the lingering threads that haven't been fully addressed by the time Rebirth ends, and see what they think about it. Because we all kind of know a little bit about, we have that juxtaposition about, well, we know what happened in the past, and compare that standing up to what could happen now, where other people only have the now. What happened in the past doesn't really matter to their enjoyment. So I'm curious to see like what people with that perspective think about Rebirth's ending versus the potential of a part 3. But yeah, make sure that you go on to rpgsite.net to read Josh's full spoiler-free review on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Uh, Josh and Alex have been taking a lot of time to write up a ton of how-tos, guides, listicles, things like that up on the website as well. So if you're playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and you're not sure how to change party members or whatever the thing that Chow was trying to figure out for synergy skills or how to get Tifa airborne, might have guides up, and they're going to be continuing to go up throughout the week up on rpgsite.net.
Throughout the week and beyond, if you are trying to get the 300% stagger thing trophy, we've got that too.
There's no fat chocobo in this one, so you had to do something different.
Oh,
Yeah, you're gonna have to beat up Titan again. Tifa once again. Tifa is the crux,
Yeah, there you go.
but it's Titan this time. He is your fat chocobo.
I did it on Jabberwock.
Oh yeah, him too. Actually, Jabberwock could do it too.
They just have to be sufficiently big.
Yeah, they need to be big and they need to not die before Tifa beats them up
There you go.
enough.
There you go. So, Josh, we're going to go on with the rest of our scheduled discussion points for this podcast. You are welcome to stay, but I also know that you are up at a very strange, different hour, so you're also welcome to go to sleep if you need to. So, how are you feeling about continuing or stepping out? Either way is good.
Actually, I think I will, in fact, have to take this opportunity to drop out. Thanks for having me. It's a little bit about after 4 a.m. where I am, so
I figured
I've
it
got a
was a
couple of
terrible
things
time for
coming
you.
up
So,
today. But thank you for having me, and it was good to talk about the game on the cast today.
yeah, thank you so much for
no,
joining us. It was great. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks. No problem.
sleep well, Josh, and we'll catch up later.
Thank you, and have a good morning.
All right. With that, we'll continue on with the other news outputs of this podcast. We have a handful of actual game announcements this week. A few of them were expected, and then a few of them were things that were a little bit of a surprise. But before we get to that, Josh was able to also go hands-on with a previously announced game from the developers behind the Ori series, and this is a hands-on preview for No Rest for the Wicked.
Yeah. I was able to get some early access on it and check out the opening hours of No Rest for the Wicked. This is from as you said, from Moon Studios, the developers behind the Ori series, which are, kind of beloved platformers, both Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and I forgot exactly the first Ori
And the
game,
Blind
Ori and the Blind
Forest.
Forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So both of the games I played through, really liked. So they had, as of the time of this recording, they held a live stream for No Rest of the Wicked, um, to to give more info about the title and announce that they are going to Steam Early Access in April. I believe in April 18th, I believe. And this is a really fascinating new project because it's not an Ori 3, it's total genre change shift. It is an isometric action RPG that is a mixture of something you'll find like in Path of Exile or Last Epoch and Diablo, with more of the cadence of like a Souls game, more of a Dark Souls type of flow. And I said this in my preview, but in modern action RPGs, a lot of the action RPG space these days is all about trying to go through it as fast as possible. It's very fast paced oriented. You're making your build and you're tuning that build. Uh, so you're in a way that like you're shitting out skills constantly and try to beat up dozens and dozens of enemies as fast as humanly and efficiently as possible. And everything is around that build is tuned for that. And that's totally fine. And a great way to to kind of tune like your action RPG. But in No Rest of the Wicked, it kind of dials that back where you're facing off only a few enemies at a certain given time. Obviously, there's the opening hours. I don't know how it'll change over the course of the game, but like even having like 2 to 3 enemies at once on the screen is pretty deadly because they can pretty much kill you in a few hits. Um, so in this game, it's very precision based. It's a lot about hitboxes. It's less about skill rotation and more about, hey, you have this attack button. You can tap it to do like weapon combos, or um, just a basic attack string. You can hold it down for a charge attack, And once you go into combat encounter, there'll be a stamina gauge that'll dictate those actions, much as like what people would compare to a Souls game, where all of these expend an amount of stamina. You can't spam attacks endlessly. You have to make sure that you have enough stamina to do it. As you're taking damage, as you're dishing damage, you have this additional like special meter gauge to fire off a rune attack, and up to 4 can be slotted onto a character at any single time. From the weapon types that I engage with in the demo, like two-handed swords, dual blades, and like a single-handed sword. All of them have unique rune attacks, so it might be one of those a weapon type might dictate their rune attack, but they also said in the live stream there's some way to slot different rune attacks into other weapons. But I didn't really get to mess around with that in this demo that I played. And it's a really interesting approach to it where it has to you have to be more careful than you would in No Rest for the Wicked compared to other action RPGs where um like in other action RPGs you can just kind of go buck wild with how you engage with enemy encounters. Well, in this one you have to kind of look for enemy tells, let them do their attacks that will leave them open. And it carries a lot of that same DNA that you would find in a Souls game. Uh, a lot of the things in this game is also very explorable and destructible as well. So there'll be like I posted a screenshot where there was like a shiny thing at like one end of a tower pillar and I had to go up some planks. And like it's pretty pretty precise with its platforming. Where like if you fall off like a plank, you have to go make your way up. There's no like, oh, you grabbed onto the ledge and you have to make your way back to the plank. You know, um, pulling yourself back up. It's like no, you have to make that trek around again. Go back to that plank and then kind of make sure that you're being precise with the way that you're platforming to that shiny thing. Um, and it is up. It's gonna support up to like 3 to 4 players, I believe, when the full release comes out. So it is something that you can play with your friends as well. And even though it has like that kind of the flow of a Souls combat, it there are other systems in it that are kind of taken from other action RPGs. Like for example, there's no bonfire or corpse run gameplay loop that you would use in a Souls game. It's very standard. Hey, your character is leveled up. It gives you 3 stat points. You can allocate these stat points however the fuck you want throughout these certain stat categories. And the nice like UI thing is like if you're carrying a weapon on your character that corresponds to one of the stat points like strength, dexterity, or intelligence, like you'll see those equipped weapons power up depending on like if you decide to put a stat point in a corresponding stat that scales with them. Like say I'm carrying these daggers. I don't know if it's like dexterity or strength that they scale off of. It'll tell you like in the weapon description, but even that as like a secondary safe measure, it's like, hey, if you slot a point into dexterity, you'll see on the UI like this corresponds to the daggers that you have equipped as well. Um, and so yeah, I mean, it was a good time. You can check out like a more thorough, detailed preview about like what I found in the demo up on the site. Uh, and yeah, I don't know exactly when the full release is going to be. All I know is it's coming to Steam Early Access on April 18th, and then like the full release for PC will also be the launch of like when it comes out of PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. And hopefully they strike gold with it the same way they did with the Ori games because I hold those games in high regard. And I hope No Rest for the Wicked meets a similar bar of quality that those games achieved.
Man,
Can you kind of tee up
man,
for me, like when you talk about isometric but Souls-like combat? I have a hard time putting that in my mind's eye.
hmm So let's say, for example, like how Diablo does it when you're kind of engaging an enemy in Diablo. You're not really thinking about like the enemy's animations to like go actively dodge it. You're kind of just like firing off whatever like you have on your skill hotbar rotation. Like say, for example, you're playing a sorcerer in Diablo, and you have like this skill rotation that's like cast this fireball, do these icicle shards, they'll cost a certain amount of mana, and theoretically that like this skill rotation will kill off like 5 enemies at once because of their AoE effect, right? In Diablo. In No Rest for the Wicked, let's say you come up like against this orc. This individual orc has like you have to actively block and evade its attacks and then use those openings after it attacks to like get in your hits. Um, and all those attacks that you do have a stamina cost to them. So like your basic attacks, your heavier attacks, um, and like your rune attacks all have a stamina cost associated with them. So you can't endlessly spam them. You're aside from rune attacks, you're not expending like mana or a secondary resource to like fire them off. Unlike it's only the rune attacks that do, but like your basic attacks that are like you're actively dishing out. Um, that's kind of like your primary form of DPS, at least in these opening hours. Unlike say like in Diablo, you're already pretty reliant on like your specific classes resource that you're um using to fire off skills. You're not doing like the basic attack of like a sorcerer to like whack them with the staff. You're firing off spells that consume mana to beat up enemies. While in this game, you're using stamina to use basic attacks that are beefy to dispose of the opposition. If that makes sense,
That makes sense. So basically, it just seems like
it's
in
more
Diablo,
rangy.
there's like there's swarms of enemies, and you might have some avoid bad on the ground. But that's kind of it. Otherwise, it's just resource management. I won't say just because it does get pretty involved, but it seems like this one is more focused on animations and managing your stamina meter using your basic attacks versus spamming your abilities whenever they come off cooldown in a
Yeah,
Diablo game.
yeah, yeah. So that it's a different flow. Sorry, James, we cut
Mhm.
you off earlier. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that like an early access for this is dropping in April, so it's like, oh my god, the beginning of 2024 is still just barely any, like not even any time to just like take a breather with all the RPGs dropping. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, I think I'll just wait for full release on this one because there's gonna be more features added into it over time. But I hope people who are hopping into it like have a blast because I know there's some sort of like town hub building mechanic. That wasn't you couldn't access that in the demo, but they said something akin to that in the live stream event that they had, where like they're putting a lot into this game. I'm looking forward to seeing like what the final product is. I hope I hope it's the similar vein that like the Ori games are. I hope it's just like it's not a live service game like how most action RPGs are these days. I hope it's kind of like just its own full campaign, full end game, but not like limited time events or battle passes. I hope it's just like just a full game from the get go. But we'll see.
Yeah, and so that'll release in early access on April 18th. And again, the early access, of course, is PC only, but it will release in full for consoles as well. And then you had one other game that you wanted to talk about, Josh, because you said you wanted to talk about it today, just to kind of potentially put a final statement on it for a game that just came out at the end of the month, and that
Yeah.
is X Astris, which is
Mhm.
the premium mobile game from the same developers as Arknights.
Yeah. I was really optimistic about this game because I think it's a pretty novel game. It is a game that is Arknights is a free-to-play mobile gacha game, but these same developers decided to release a mobile game that isn't gacha and it isn't free-to-play. It is a buy-to-play. It is cost $10 on the iOS and the Google Play Store. And I was like, that's really novel. Like you don't really see that anymore of like mobile games. So I was hoping like this is going to be a really cool game, and some parts of it are cool, but I think the production value of this game is pretty poor. The things that I like about it, this is a game that is a turn-based RPG. You have up to 3 characters in battle, and the battle system is pretty neat. It is focused around diminishing and replenishing action points based on the enemy state. So, for example, there'll be skills that you can slot into like a character's like combo actions. Like say I slot in 3 skills. If I tap on this character 3 times in battle, theoretically I'll spend 3 action points for them to do that basic combo. And that's like the very, very basic gist of it. But there you can mix it up, and instead of like expending all those 3 AP points linearly, you can make it so let's say that your starting skill on this character is a launcher, and then you can have another character follow up on it with and their first skill might be it'll do an attack on an aerial state enemy, so a launched enemy, and if you this attack is will replenish AP because it is the proper skill that you use that has the property of dealing damage to launched enemies. Therefore, you get 1 AP back. Okay, so now that enemy has now fallen to the ground, and now they're in a down state. You can replenish another AP if you use another skill on a character that hits downed enemies. So now you have a full 3 AP once more. So you can expend that on another character skill that might do AoE damage or might reel in other enemies. And then, you can expend other skills to, hit all of those enemies at once. And then maybe you have another skill to down them, and then use another skill to like replenish AP again. It's kind of like that balancing action economy. You can't use the same skill more than once in a turn, but you're finding a way to like tap all your buttons without completely expending all your AP before you're able to do all your actions at once, or all of your available actions rather. So that's the cool part about the combo system. There's a lot of combo theory. There's a lot of like, hey, what am I gonna do to get the most out of my turns to deal as much damage as possible without no wasted actions. So that's the cool thing about it. Another cool aspect of combat is like this active defense system where like when a enemy is about to attack you, your characters are always defending, but there's a tell, kind of like in Super Mario RPG. There's a tell in their attacks where like it'll flash for a split second, and then you tap the enemy your character to kind of do a parry, and then that parry will uh, have different effects on a character by character basis. So, for example, one of the characters, if you do a successful parry on her, you'll expend the balance uh, gauge of a of a of an enemy, and if you successfully deplete all of the balance off of an enemy, um, you go into this state, this hyper time, where you can um, basically attack freely as much as possible during that state. It's very brief, but it allows you to kind of mount an offense during an enemy's turn, and so forth. And this parry can be color coded, so like it might flash red, it might flash blue, and there's appropriate characters between the two main characters, um, where you have to kind of switch to them on the fly and then parry with them. So it's a nice thing to kind of keep up the flow of combat and making you active in combat, despite being a turn-based um, battle system. The thing I dislike about this game is kind of like everything else. Um, mm, there's just like a lot of like polish and issues around this game that like it just kind of feels like a chore to play. For example, starting with a minor thing, when like you can like there's like breakable interactables that you might get like stuff out of. When you press like the button to like kind of hit interactables or even start an enemy, there's like no sound effect at all between that like of a character swiping, like punching or kicking um like nearby vases. You'll tap the button, they'll do the animation, but it's complete silence.
I
And
forgot to hire the sound team.
it just feels floaty, and it just feels wrong. It's just like, okay. Then there are like just like other things where like the getting around environments doesn't feel great. Like the character movement is like very slow. Just doesn't have like a lot of like weight or punch to it. It just kind of feels cheap to put it like, to put it bluntly. The way that like this game like does tutorials is awful because you'll be reading a tutorial and like but it'll like just go on to the next thing like immediately. Like you're trying to like read like maybe like a 2 sentence thing, it'll give you like maybe I don't know half a second to give you read it before it goes on to the next thing, and you don't know what the fuck it said, and there's no way to like go back to that tutorial to say what it said. So you're just kind of figuring it out along the way, because this game will not give you the time to read like through a lot of its tutorials. So you're like, okay, and then narrative wise, you don't know what the fuck is going on. Um, here's what I picked up on. I only completed like the first quote unquote part of this game. Apparently, it picks up in the second part. I'm like, okay, whatever. But one of the main characters is Yan. She's an investigator. I don't really know what she's investigating right now. Like it's some sort of like ancient all-landish civilization. She's on this train. It goes off the rails. Something bad happens. She meets up with a secondary main character named V. And there's something weird about like the names of this game where like some names like V have a superscript of a number. So it's like V and then like 3 superscript on it, but they only say V. They never address the superscript 3. I don't know why. There's another character named Zero in all caps, and she has the superscript of 2. When they say her name in Japanese, it's just they never address the number or anything by it. So it's like okay. Um, and just the character interactions are just so dull. There's not the one character, the playable character that I like is like this kind of like this furball creature, and it's like its name is Manganese, like the element, and it's like okay, cool, and like the way they abbreviate it is like the other elemental chart, elemental table name is like MN. It's like oh, knees, you know, um, but other than that, there's like so many aspects of this game just like are just are lacking polish, and like that's like a really big bummer. It's like I was hoping this game is good because hopefully it could be used as an example of like, hey, there could be successful premium priced mobile games that are good, but this game is like not good. The color palette of the world is like very flat and dull and grayish, and even if you bump up the brightness, it still feels flat and just not really appealing to look at. The visual fidelity is not great. Even if you bump up all the settings to the max, it still doesn't look good. Um, there, one aspect of the upgrade system that I do like is like there are these. Um, each character has like a slot, like a almost like a board where you can like Tetris, put in pieces like Tetris. So you kind of are trying to fit as many pieces as you can for them to get stat enhancements based on like the pieces that you give them on whether you're able to puzzle out, you know, uh, like there's like the optimal amount of pieces to fill up this board to give them the maximum amount of like stats on this character. That's one aspect that's cool, but there's just a lot of things not going for this game. Even like the way I played this game was on my phone, so a lot of it was touch, like moving around for touch. It was like you 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 tolerate it or you hate it, which is I'm on the tolerate. Right? You don't. It's not a love or hate. It's you tolerate it or you hate it. I don't love. I don't know if people out there love it. I personally I never got used to like. I never got comfortable moving around with a touchscreen in a 3D game, but I'm able to tolerate it. That's fine. But when you start introducing things like, "Hey, do you want to use an item in battle?" It's like, of course I want to use it. Like, if I need to heal someone in battle with an item, you have to like put up the items menu, and then you have to like hold and drag that item to the character, and it doesn't feel great. Um, so I don't like that you have to like use that instead of just like tapping on an item to like use on a character. Just like have me tap it and then like have me press on a character and then I'll do it instead of like hold and drag. That doesn't feel good. I also had this game mirrored on my computer screen using an app. Like was able to mirror the audio and the visuals. So I was like seeing the game because if I'm trying to play this game on my mobile screen, it is very hard to read the text on a lot of like the menus because there's a lot of fucking text on the screen at once. And you're like, what the fuck does that say on my phone? So I look at my computer monitor and I'm like, okay, that's what it says. It's very wordy. Um there's just a lot of like lore things, and it's just very very sci-fi wordy. Where like it's all to me it's a lot of mumbo jumbo. It just doesn't read well, and I'm just like there's just there's just a lot of this game that like I do not like. I do not enjoy. Um, I could only tolerate maybe 4 to 5 hours of it, and like I completed the first like major section of the game before it like does a time skip, and then I'm like, I don't know if I can play anymore, man. This is not a good game. To me it's a bummer, right? I wanted this game to be good so I can point to it and be like, hey, you know, there's
And no
potential.
gotcha,
Yeah,
buy it, you own it, sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Well, here's the weird thing about this, right? Where you you technically have to log into an account to play it because it has cloud because there's actually save and load things there. You can manually save it and load it, but you can upload your save to the cloud. But if you turn off the internet on your phone like airplane mode, it does have like an offline mode. So it's like that's also weird as well. So like, but there's no way to like manually put it to offline mode. You have to like set your phone to like airplane mode or some shit to like go into the offline mode of this game. Other than that, you have to play it by signing into like a hyperglyph account or something. Um, that's I don't know, man. It's got. I think as far as I know, the feedback to this game has not been good to like the primary Chinese player base. I think the developers have issued like an apology statement on the state of this game
Yeah,
already.
that does
Um,
not sound good.
so I mean, even they're
And
aware that
does it
like
have online components or no?
no, as far as I
It's like
know,
a single
no.
player game. All right.
Yeah, so it's just a normal single player game, but there are some good parts about it. There are few good parts about it. Most of it is not good, and I think it's pretty reflective that like they already had to issue an apology saying, "Oh, we're sorry that it fucking sucks." It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
apologies, I can understand for, like, m multiplayer games and, like, your server infrastructure we've seen, or but, like, apologies for, like, a single player game, just something about it, it's like, "Oh, that must be really bad."
so yeah, I don't know. Hopefully they get their shit together and they can kind of improve parts about the game. I feel like it's way too late. You've already released it. People paid money for it. Probably a good amount of refunds, but it's just like you could have just I don't know, you could have just let them work on it a little bit longer. But I even know if like more time equals better game. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this was just like cursed from the start. I don't know. Um, but
Isn't that game supposed to be like a prototype that they made a long time ago to just bring it to retail or something?
I don't know. I kind of want my $10 back. I paid money for this game, and I was like, well, I did it for science. And sometimes, when you do things for science, sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's a failed experiment.
Well, at least you tried.
I tried. I gave it my best shot. I had fun with its battle system, but a good battle system can only bring your game so far. If everything else is not great, then or at least good, then what can you do? What can you do? It just didn't feel great to play outside of that.
And then, before we go on to into the news, Josh, you did write up one very specific feature
Uh huh.
about a very specific character's, proliferation for collaboration events.
Yeah. So it's 2024 is the 7th anniversary of Nier Automata. It's already been 7 fucking years.
And I'm
And
using that costume in Granblue right now.
yeah, and we got the recent news of it selling over 8 million units, still considers to be a fucking success story of the ages. And I was like, you know what? Did anyone ever actually, when we think about 2B these days, we think about like, man, there's been so many fucking 2B collaborations and other games over the years. I was like, did anyone ever release a thorough like list of like collaborations that Nier Automata has been in other games? Because this a lot of games have collaborated with this game over the years since its release, but did anyone ever make a thorough one that chronicled it and like put it like in a chronological order? And I was like, I sure can't find one. And what better way to celebrate the 7th anniversary of Nier Automata than to fucking just do it myself? And so I went deep into the trenches and did a lot of research of every single collaboration that 2B has been ever since 2017. And funny enough, even in the year 2017, there has been at least one. Actually, there's actually been at least two collaborations with Nier Automata every single year it's released. And it's like, what the fuck? And it's just like, man. Outside of this year's only been one so far with the Granblue Fantasy versus Rising fighting game, which added 2B as a playable character, and that's her second fighting game collaboration with Soul Calibur 6
What
being the
was her
first.
first? Oh, so there
Uh,
you go.
yeah, Soul Calibur 6 being the first. Um, and yeah, I was just like, you know what? I might as well just do this for science, and so I did it. Ever since the release of that game, up until now, the exact dates and years of when 2B was first included into a game. And that feature is up on the site. I just decided to do a fun feature, we don't get I'm not able to like um do as many fun features as like I would like because I'm just like it's hard. It's a lot of research, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, and this one a lot of research, for sure, especially to like the dark corners of the internet, where like you kind of need to know some Japanese to navigate like when and where 2B has been, and it was fun though. Like usually the main when I embark on features like this, it's kind of like a two-way deal of like, is it going to be fun for me and is it going to be fun for readers? And if both align, I'll do it. That's what I did with this one. So go up on the site. It's on a banner. Give it a read or a skim. It's a lot of collaborations. With some games that you either didn't know existed or you didn't know that happened. Like, hey, remember Gravity Rush 2? Kat got a 2B costume for that. Um, Shortly after the release of Automata. That was a cool collaboration.
Now you're obligated to update it whenever there's.
I might actually like if people have asked, "Are you gonna update it?" I'm like, well, maybe actually. It is kind of the definitive list. Maybe.
Mhm.
I mean, look, I had to write the words
And it
Babylon's Fall in the year 2024 for this feature. Think about that.
and it's only going to slow down, right? So
Oh,
the
of
worst is already
course, yeah,
over.
that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, no one would ever think about collaborating with Automata ever again after Rising. Surely.
But no, it's a really cool list. 2B's 8-year-long journey to become the goddess of collaboration events up on RPGsite.net, and it's a lot. And you've got screen caps, you've got details, dates. It's a fun list to read through, even if you haven't been involved. As someone who's not played any of these collaboration events except for Reincarnation, which you kind of stated as a freebie, um, it's
Yeah,
just fun to have it all chronicled.
it's the meme picture of Obama meddling himself with that
Yeah.
collaboration.
All right, with that, we'll go into the news topics. We're going to start out here with a handful of game announcements. The first of which is the primary announcement that came out of the Pokemon Presents at the end of last week. And we all kind of were hoping and expecting for the announcement of a new entry in the Pokemon Legends series, as well as potentially a Gen 5 remake, because it seems like it's about that time. Well, we got one of those things. We got a cinematic announcement trailer for Pokemon Legends ZA. So this is a Gen 6 Pokemon, Pokemon X and Y. So I've seen some people say we finally have Pokemon Z in a
Zygarde
Legends
finally
format
has game.
game. Now, the trailer for this is more of a concept trailer than anything. It shows the kind of like a digital blueprint of a city. What's the name of the city again, James?
Lumios, I think. Lumios
Lumios.
City.
Yeah. I've not played Kalos. So I don't have the nostalgia for this, but if you did play Kalos, then this
S-
seems to be what this is targeting.
So here's the thing. I
Yeah.
don't have nostalgia for Gen 6, and I've seen a lot of people that feel the same way. But for me, Gen 6 always felt like a generation that really needed that third game. Like it needed Z. It needed to be fleshed out. It needed the story to be a bit different, kind of like how Platinum did it for Generation 4, where the story was a lot better and like Sinnoh felt a lot more fully realized and that sort of thing. So when Z didn't happen, and it's blatantly obvious it was canceled last minute because like pretty much the Zygarde forms and whatnot were added to Generation 7 as a separate thing. A lot of folks just pretty much gave up and assumed that we would never get a follow-up for Callus like this, at least not for like decades. Like you said, most people expected this announcement to be a Generation 5 like remake or some sort of Legends game that dealt with Generation 5, and there was some people thinking, oh, maybe it'll be Generation 2 because we had Let's Go, which was another Generation 1 remake, so maybe it's time for Johto to get another thing.
Yeah, let's
So-
go Johto. I didn't think of that. That could have been fun.
But I will say that I was talking with a friend about this like a few weeks ago where I was like, you know what game would actually really benefit from a Legends title? Generation 6. Because I felt like the lore for Generation 6 has a lot to work with. Because like, okay, so it's basically Norse mythology, just Pokemon-ified. And yeah, I'm actually really excited for this. Like, not just from the potential, oh, well, Zygarde's finally getting his own game, and that's like genuinely something I'm looking forward to, but also the core conceit is very different, even from like Legends Arceus. Instead of it being, oh, it's basically just like before Sinnoh was developed, and you're going all over the country and like dealing with stuff that way. And this one, it's like, okay, no, the entire game takes place in Lumio City. The entire game takes place in Lumio City. And it's a truly urban Pokemon game. Whereas the closest we've gotten to something like that was, I'd say, like the Generation 3 GameCube games, where you had pretty much all the gameplay taking place in towns and like no routes or anything like that. But I'm curious to see how it'll work for Z-Day. Very curious.
One thing that's also interesting about this is that this is slated for a 2025 release. So is this the first time that we're not getting a major Pokemon release in a given year? Because we've talked about how they released Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, Legends, and Scarlet Violet all within a calendar year. Go ahead, and what were you going to say?
Funny, because it used to be that we didn't necessarily get a Pokemon game every year. And then actually, the last time that we had a gap year was 2015, because 2015 was when people assumed that we would get Pokemon Z. But they just skipped that year, and then we got Sun and Moon in 2016. And ever since then, we've got a mainline Pokemon game or a DLC for a mainline Pokemon game taking the place of that major release every single year since 2016. This is the first exception in almost a decade.
And I think people are on board with it based on how Scarlet and Violet and Arceus, as much as we liked Arceus, it wasn't really in much of a better state performance-wise.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to see. And of course, there's always the unknown question in the air: is this a Switch 2 title?
Yeah,
of course, it's
because
announced
Yeah,
for Switch.
yeah.
You gotta wonder, because if this was a cross-gen release, and just based off the core conceit of the game being, oh well, it's all taking place in a single city, you could generally assume that would benefit from better hardware. If this was a cross-gen release, then maybe it was originally going to be a late 2024 launched release. But then with the rumors that's been going around where it's like, oh, well, the Switch 2 has been delayed to like March 2025. Maybe it's like, well, since this is cross-gen and we want this to release day and date on Switch 2, we're going to have to delay this until early 2025. Which, again, completely speculation. We don't know for sure what's going on, but it would not surprise me if that's the case.
Here's how they're going to shock the world. People are going to be like, okay, this is going to be a title, probably going to maybe gonna be compatible with a theoretical Switch 2. That's releasing next year. Shock the world, and it'll be running at a stable 30 FPS, no drops.
We can hope.
It's asking too much from a Pokemon.
I'm hoping if it is actually a Switch 2 title as well, screw 30 FPS. We're going 60.
Look, I didn't want to dream big. I was debating in my head whether I should say 30 or 60 for this one. So, yeah, I wanted to be realistic, but you're a dreamer, so, we can rock with that too.
It's okay. The Switch 2 will obviously support a variable refresh rate, so even if it does dip down to 40, it'll still be a much, much better experience.
For those that did play Gen 6, is that just James? What does
I kind of dipped a little into Pokemon X, and I was like, that was the telltale early sign that Pokemon was no longer for for me. When I tried to dip into that, I'm like, I don't like this.
but I was just gonna ask, as someone who didn't play Gens 5 through 7 or 8, what does the A mean? Do we know?
Doesn't mean well. So
I mean, we don't really know what the Z means either, but is there any speculation on the A?
well, we know what the Z means because Zygarde,
Okay, well, I mean, that's
and then the
suppose.
Z even
Yeah.
looks like Zygarde. It has like the same color scheme, the scales, and all that. So it's obviously
Okay.
Zygarde. A, I believe there's a character in Gen 6 who's called A, and he would make sense to be in the game.
Yeah, they're just
Uh,
naming characters letters now. Game Freak's so
Well,
lazy now.
we've already talked about characters that have number superscripts or whatever.
Oh, that's true.
So
Yeah,
why
so
not
cut from the
letters?
same cloth.
But yeah, obviously 2025, and we didn't see any gameplay. We only saw like the concept of the Lumio City like blueprint. So I'm sure we'll have this sprinkled in into upcoming Nintendo presentations, Pokemon presentations throughout 2024. But yeah, slated for a worldwide release in 2025, and we've got a teaser of what it is for Gen 6, and we'll keep tabs on it as we proceed throughout the year. This is another announcement staying on the Nintendo track. We talked last week about obviously all the announcements coming out of the Nintendo Direct, and we very specifically called out something that showed up in the Japanese Nintendo Direct, the Furyu title called Reynatis. And then within the last week, NIS America announced that they will be launching Reynatis for the West in fall 2024. So it's coming out in Japan in midsummer in July, and then NIS America will be releasing this in the fall, unspecified date. And this will be it showed up on the Nintendo Direct, but is also releasing for PlayStation consoles. So we got an announcement trailer for that from NIS America, and yes, it is coming westward. Why it didn't show up in the Nintendo Direct, hard to say.
Yeah, it's PlayStation, Switch, okay, PC as well. Okay.
Oh, is it also PC?
Yeah, PC as well.
Okay, we'll just have to add that little icon on it.
Yeah.
So we'll do that.
No, we did. It's in the article. Oh
Oh,
no,
I see it.
you're looking at the little platform, the icons. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
My guess is that the NIS America announced the PC version because
They
they're
did,
publishing
yeah.
it. So there, it's a little. We'll get that added. But yeah, so at Nintendo Switch, PlayStation consoles, and PC for the West in the fall. It will release on consoles in Japan in the summer. This is another announcement from Nexon. That's a Korean publisher, right? So
Yep.
this is a single player side game for the MMO Vindictus. This is a game called Vindictus Dying Fate. Announced for
Defying Fate.
PC. What?
Defying
Dying
Fate.
Defying Fate or Defying Fate?
I think I said the right thing, but maybe my enunciation was just wrong. Defying Fate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is announced for PC and unspecified consoles. There will be a pre-alpha test on PC on March 13th. I don't know any other details about like where that alpha test will be available. And then when I saw that this was announced, and there's a trailer that goes along with it, and the trailer looks like kind of high fantasy. It looks almost Blade and Soul-ish, which I think Nexon had a hand in that too, maybe. No, that was NCSoft. And then I went to go ahead and like, oh, this is based on the MMO. I forgot about the MMO. Let me take a look at it. I guess it released in 2010, and it's on Steam, and it doesn't have great reviews. And I know that's very like judging a book by its cover, but like, oh, I guess they must be doing well enough to decide to do a spin-off like single player title for this. No release window yet.
It's
But yeah,
crazy that this is coming out now because like Vindictus was like one of those early like Korean MMOs on Steam. I want to say it was like 2009 or 2010. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been
yeah,
a long time. Yeah, like even before Steam, like it had its own client, kind of like how Maple Story did, and all that stuff. And it was pretty popular among people because it was kind of like one of those early action RPG MMOs, and like when people like would party up and group up, and a lot, it's kind of like that almost Monster Hunter esque loop of like taking on big bosses together.
Yeah, it was
For the
definitely
party.
more on the like Fantasy Star
Yeah.
Online side of the equation
Yeah.
because it was like, okay, here's a stage and then there's a boss fight at the end.
Right.
So
hmm And a lot of it is like hitbox related, like you get to actually dodge out of the way for a swing. Obviously, if your ping didn't align with everyone, if the servers, it didn't matter anyway, and all that sort of shit. So a lot of like you'll see like the response to this from many people is like, man, that really takes me back because a lot of people did like try out Vindictus back in the day. It was definitely one of those early examples of kind of the power of like playing together with other people.
I'm curious, do we know if this is going to be free to play or if it's going to be premium?
So good question. They don't know either. There's a Q&A thing on Steam.
Yeah,
that's like
I'm
pretty
looking at
pretty in depth. And they said they said they're still determining that whether it's free to play or price game.
Yeah, I'm reading this and it's like it's funny how it says, "Can I play with Steam Deck?" and it says the pre-alpha test cannot be played on Steam Deck, which implies that they're probably going to support it for the full release, but just they're not dealing with that shit with the pre-alpha. Which fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
fair enough. It's also funny because like they also answer questions like, "Is this a Souls-like game?" It's
Why
like
would you ask that kind of question?
it's so funny. It's like it's a great Q&A because they're very transparent, I guess is the word for it, because even they're like due to the nature of this game, they wanted to be more grounded, and they're just gonna have more like less revealing outfits for it compared to like the original Vindictus, because the original Vindictus definitely had like they made money by selling very aesthetically pleasing outfits characters.
That seems like a very specific thing to tackle up front.
Well,
Like
I mean,
first announcement of game.
well, the thing is that with the current state of things in South
Yeah.
Korea, it's something that they do have to tackle.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Mhm.
it's unfortunate. But
Yeah.
I'm curious about this. Like, I remember playing like 20 hours of Vindictus and having a good time with it. So I'll definitely try the pre-alpha. It's like
Yeah, hopefully it's just like an open pre-alpha because I definitely want to give it a shot too.
I think you might have to join the Discord server, so I'm gonna do that right
okay.
now.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
not
know.
sure. I'm not sure, but there is a Discord server for it. I'm gonna see if there's like more information there. Let's see.
Mhm. But yeah, I mean, this is like even the screenshots that like they put up. Like one of them is definitely it's not a Souls-like game, but it is definitely inspired some of the presentation by Souls. And obviously, they said it'll like have resemblances to other popular games as well. So and they say I guess if you're listening and you're still playing the original Vindictus, that just because they're releasing this does not mean they're ending the service of the original Vindictus. It's meant to exist alongside it. This game is primarily single player, but they do plan on adding multiplayer to the full release. They're still they don't know whether they're gonna add PvP yet, and all that stuff. So I recommend, if you're interested in learning more about the nature of this game, I put a link to the Q&A on Steam on the article. It is a pretty robust Q&A that answers a lot of questions that people might have about this. I'm kind of thankful that they did that. I kind of wish, more game announcements had like a Q&A style kind of thing going on that's like kind of gets a good insight on like what this project.
We also got an announcement of another isometric action RPG called Dragonkin: The Banished. And who is the publisher of this? See, it's
Nacon.
Nason. We've
Yeah.
talked about how that's pronounced, but I forget.
think it's-
Nacon, the French publishing group. And the developer is Ico Software. And this is Dragonkin: The Banished. It's going to be coming out on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. It is slated to come out in about a year, in February 2025. This is an isometric action RPG. It came out with a 1-minute announcement trailer, and the main thing here that like we already talked about No Rest for the Wicked, another upcoming fantasy action RPG. This one here talks specifically about a city that grows and develops as you make decisions and discoveries throughout the game. So it seems like you mentioned that that's kind of a component of it's a component of a lot of games, but including No Rest for the Wicked, we saw it in Sandland as well. But here it seems like it's a pretty big part of their press release is the city that you're going to be going through. I'm trying to think if the city has a name to it.
I couldn't see it if they did.
No, they just
Maybe you
say
name it.
your city grows. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the classes that they talked about, or the four heroes are Barbarian, the Witch, the Knight, and the Archer. So it's actually when reading that, it actually makes me think more of like a Gauntlet like, rather than
Yeah,
Diablo
yeah.
like, just because it sounds like you take on each of these four roles in a multiplayer game.
Also, a dying feature in video games, but this does support local co-op for up to 2 players and online up to 4 players. So if you are looking for in the market for a new local co-op isometric ARPG, this is going to offer. Which is, you don't see that much anymore. Diablo 3 did that with its console releases as well.
I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 supports that if
That's
you're
true.
not playing on Series S.
Yeah, you're right. Is that only up to 2 people, right, for that one as
Only
well?
up to 2 people, yeah.
Okay.
That game is pretty CPU demanding, so it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's good to see that games here and there still support local co-op.
Looking at you, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero.
Oh, did they say they're not gonna have local co-op split
Yeah,
screen?
they
Or
did.
Not
They
local co-op, I mean versus.
Yeah, they did say that there's no split screen. Now
That's
everyone's immediately started looking at the Series S and being like, "You."
I mean, yeah, because because like when you think about Budokai Tenkaichi, that series, like a lot of people have very fond memories playing with their friends out there when they're visiting their friends to go play. So that is pretty kind of big for that series.
Yeah.
And the last game announcement that we have is a new Touhou game. This is Touhou Genso Wanderer Foresight. And I know that James has kind of educated me a little bit on the Touhou kind of series before, how these are all effectively fan games in a way. Is the Genso Wanderer, is that like a sub-series that has existed before, or is this all kind of brand new?
This has existed before. I know that the Genso Wanderer series has been around for a bit. I remember playing the original, I think, on the Vita or PS4, one or the other, and it's been around. Let's see if there's a Wikipedia page.
The
So yeah,
Genso
this has been
Wanderer
announced for
universe.
PC. It is coming out on May 15th.
It is
And
inspired like I know it's like inspired by Shiren the Wanderer to some extent. For some
yeah,
of
I
these
was actually
things.
gonna say there's not a lot of gameplay in the announcement trailer. It's mostly dialogue, but the small bits of gameplay that it does show, I actually said like, "Oh, this looks like Mystery Dungeon-esque." So that seems like that's the style of game it is for the gameplay components.
Okay, so it seems like it's a part of the Fushigi no Gensokyo series, which is yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out when the first one happened, but I'm not finding too much
Yeah,
information.
they do mention like in the description that like this title is a fan made game based on the Dojin game Touhou project by Team Shanghai Alice. And
Okay, so Genso Wanderer was the third game in the series and the first one to hit consoles, and it came out on January 31st, 2014. So the most recent one, I'm not sure if it's like an actually totally new, or if it's just like an updated version of the third game. Trying to figure it out.
need a Touhou
Let's see.
expert.
Yeah, unfortunately, I am not a Touhou expert. Let's see if there is there a Steam page already.
I
Is there
think
a
there
Steam
is.
page?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me see. Okay, let's see. A new dungeon crawler RPG in the Genso Wanderer series. So it seems like after like Fushigi no Gensokyo, they made 3. They made this a separate side series now. So kind of like how like the Trail series after like Legend of Heroes 6 just became its own thing.
That makes sense.
Seems like. I still don't know which number this is, but it seems interesting. I do not have the time to play this.
Yeah, no worries. So it'll come out in 2 months on Steam. Right now it is just PC exclusive. And it looks like the developer Aquastyle has released a handful of these on Steam over the years. 2021, Touhou Genso Wanderer Lotus Labyrinth R. Mostly positive reviews, so it seems like they've done pretty well in their little niche. So after that, we've got a few updates for some upcoming games. Some of these are things that we've kind of talked about kind of on a weekly cadence with previous podcasts. So we have another preview video for Rise of the Ronin, which again is coming out in March. We've been kind of flip-flopping between their two series of trailers. They have their behind the scenes kind of series with the development team, where first they talked about the history, then they talked about kind of like their combat inspirations. And then they've announced this more gameplay focused vignette series, which is like the kind of cutscenes without any voiceover or dialogue. The first one they had last week or the week before, we talked about the world building. This one is a vignette series video only about combat. So it's about 2 minutes just of pure going over the different weapon styles, going over the range and melee armaments that you can have. The only thing that I really captured out of here, other than just all the combat animations, is that it looks like it's borrowing from, and maybe this was known and I just didn't capture it until watching this trailer, is that when it shows the different weapons like katanas or spears, it shows like the low, mid, high stances on each. Like each will have multiple combat styles. So that's kind of something that is akin to the stances in Neo. But yeah, just it's nice just to have a gameplay trailer without hand holding or too much tutorialization, but it kind of just shows all the armaments, the bayonets, the firearms, and then just some
Will
of the weapon
Odachi be
styles that we
viable
see.
in this one, unlike Neo?
Will what be viable? Odachi?
Odachi.
Uh,
Hey, I
I hope
used
so.
Odachi in Neo 2, and I had a great time with it.
I
The secret was is that I used tonfas, so I would basically whittle down their bar with the tonfas, and then once it broke, I would switch to Odachi and just go sicko mode, and it worked out really well.
I still like that you can swim in this game, like under the water. It's fun. We also have seemingly the last of the Josef's Guide trailers for Unicorn Overlord, which again we already talked about how that has a demo available now, and it's coming out early this month. It is March. We're recording this on March 2nd.
It's
coming
going
out in
to
about
be
a
out
week
in 6 days, less than
at the
6
time of
days.
recording. So by the time you're listening to this, it might be out already or out in just a couple
I
days.
gotta get through Rebirth, man.
Yeah. So we talked about how they're having like these written kind of news posts about the different aspects of the game, and they're following up those news posts with a video version in the form of Yosef's Guide. So we kind of already talked about how these like the valor points, how the combat works in terms of encountering enemies on the overworld, pressuring them, and then the gambit system, the active and passive abilities. So a lot of that we kind of detailed last week on the podcast, and this is kind of just it being compartmentalized in a little 4-minute video. So it's nice because it shows some of the gameplay animations for how combat executes automatically and things like that. But likely the last. I'm guessing we might get a launch trailer, I suppose, in the upcoming week. But this the game comes out next week. The next time we talk about this game, we will be able to play it. So that'll be pretty fun. Outside of the demo, I mean.
Yep. Which the demo itself is basically just like the beginning of the game anyway, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't realize next week on the podcast we can talk about this. And then this is not really like a formal update, but coming out in 2024, we've talked about extensively Metaphor ReFantazio. This is from from Atlus, from a lot of the creative minds behind Persona. So basically the digital store pages for Metaphor ReFantazio have gone up in the last week on Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation. And of course, along with these, they come with their little description. So it's kind of like in a way like a diet press release for the game, even though it's just the store page that's publicly facing. The main thing here that I think Adam wanted to kind of cover was that on these game description for these, on one of the key features, it says, go on quests, dungeon dive, and hunt for treasures by day, strengthen relationships, build bonds, and increase virtues by night. So it has kind of like the very, I don't know if classic's the right word, very standard, it seems like Persona-esque. I always feel kind of bad just saying like, oh, this is only like Persona, but
This
it's
point the
really is
creators
kind of,
of Persona, so I mean,
yeah, it's the very natural launching point for it. But yeah, it seems like there's a clear delineation between a day-night cycle and scheduling between powering up your combat capabilities
it's
versus
interesting because
your
it's an
personal
inverse,
abilities.
right? Because
Yeah.
usually in Persona you do the relationship stuff, the S-Link stuff by day, and then by night you do or later on in the day you do the dungeon diving stuff. So this one is like the reverse of that, which is weird.
Mhm.
And then
And then
I think
otherwise,
go for it.
I was gonna say otherwise, just a lot of the boilerplate on their key features, like a battle system combining turn-based and real-time actions, mysterious and exciting story. The day-night thing was the key thing that I wanted to call out here that I saw was interesting.
Yeah, I do. The other key bullet points, like the gauntlet runner that we've seen in trailers, and how you're going to use that to like kind of travel the world. It says to faraway dungeons and towns, and I wonder if there's like a resource spent when when you're traveling place to place, whether that's like you have to like consume like a portion of your day to go, or multiple portions of the day to travel places. Yeah, with that gauntlet runner. So I wonder if that's also a factor to consider in that regard in the game. I'm really curious just to see like the straight up like gameplay footage of like what an actual like quote unquote day in this game looks like, what you do in a day.
Yeah, and still no release window yet. I assume this will be like in that October, November timeframe.
Yeah, so they mentioned fall 2024 before.
Mhm. And then with that, we go into kind of like our date rundown. And some of these are kind of announcements as well, but I've ordered these here by date. So we talked over the last couple of years about the spiritual successor to Shadow Hearts. This is the Penny Blood. And it also is getting very similar to Eiyuden Chronicles being the spiritual successor to Suikoden, getting its little like companion game in Eiyuden Chronicles Rising. Penny Blood is getting a companion game called Penny Blood Hellbound. It was announced that Penny Blood Hellbound will enter early access on March 7th. So early access is going to be a common theme, I feel like, throughout the year, because we've already talked about it for No Rest for the Wicked. Penny Blood Hellbound is going into early access in less than a week. And then there's one other game on the list that is also entering early access. So that is something that's just going to be more and more common as time goes on.
That's fine,
So
to
I
be
guess
honest. Yeah.
we could talk about this next week too. You know, if someone if someone's manages to freeze time and get a chance to look at it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Maybe Adam, I know, is very interested in this, so maybe he'll jump into it.
I don't know about, but the
Uh,
early access thing like is probably just wait till for release of this part or this side game. I don't know.
I
yeah,
will
and
say that I have a buddy of mine that they actually did donate to the Kickstarter, so they got access to this a few months ago, and they seem
oh,
to
nice.
enjoy what they played. So I'm not gonna play this. I have too much too much else to play, but
I'll wait for
it'll
the full
probably be
release of
decent.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
whenever it's finished up, I'll definitely give this a shot before the proper Penny Blood main game comes out. But you know, it's interesting where Natsumi Atari is going, because they're developing this too. They developed Eiyuden Rising, and they're also developing Reynatis. So they're
Mhm.
busy. That studio's busy.
And then one thing that is also, I don't know how I feel about this, but I mean, it's not the first time we've seen this, but if you want to get access to the early access, but you didn't support the Kickstarter, it's $20. And they do say the price will increase once the game leaves early access. So it's like an early access discount if you want access to the full game. I think that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can always just buy it before it comes out too, like right the
Yeah,
day
it's
before.
like a cheap pre-order that allows you to get a hands-on demo. All right, Chow. Genshin Impact is getting another update on March 13th, 4.5.
The only thing I know about that thing is that they added this one new wishing system for people that have trouble getting certain old units.
That
What
seems like
what
a good thing on paper.
It is a good thing, but it only
Okay.
took them nearly 3 years to add something like this. It's kind of like I'm so turned off by it.
Okay, what is this? Okay, I'm reading a Chronicled Wish, so it'll just have like a lot of old characters in it, pretty much in the pool.
It has like free characters, I think. Is it free characters, or I don't know. It's a set of free characters of each, and it's like you could pick which one, I think. And
Oh,
then
and if you roll the 5-star in it, it'll be them.
yeah,
Okay.
because people have been whining for years that it's like, oh, I just wanted Mona, but because she's not unlimited, there's never a rate up for her, so it's very hard to get her or something like that. And same with the weapons too, because when the game first started, I actually wrote on the weapon banner, which is known to be the biggest scam of the series, because I think there was one whale in China that spent about 15,000 USD, and he still couldn't get like one copy of that weapon because he kept losing the 50/50.
Holy shit.
And then eventually they added a system where they're like, okay, you can pick that weapon from the pity pool if you failed 3 times.
Yeah,
You
thanks for
know.
the money, by the way.
But it only took like something that disastrous to happen before they put some changes because it was a pretty bad PR, from someone talking shit about your game from the rolling system, right? So, yeah. So basically, when they added that, that kind of fixed a lot of things. But I already spent money on it, so that's why people say never roll on the weapon banner unless you really want to flex, right?
Hmm.
Other than that, I don't know much about this patch because I didn't read too much into it. There's like all this drama with Genshin for the last few months because they were only giving people like free wishes for the Lantern Rite event, which is like the biggest event of Genshin usually. It's like, here, thanks for the 3 years. Here's free pulls. And they caused a lot of outrage from that, right? Because I feel it's just the wording was a little bad because it's like thanks for all the support for all the years, and there's like a free pull in or something like that.
Yeah,
Are
so
you
I
still
guess
up to
that.
date on Genshin or no?
I'll just log in when there's a cool character. That's about it. But the only thing I do these days in Genshin is just I log in, clear the Spiral Abyss, log out, just collecting the free gems. And if there's a cool character that's in, I'll come and roll for it. Like Fontaine's great, but like I don't know, I'm just kind of tired of the open world formula. Like just coming to like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's like a breath of fresh air because it's different and it's cool. You know, but for Genshin, it's like I don't know. I'm just not feeling into it, even though they added like
Final
this cross.
Fantasy cool, Genshin uncool.
That's
Look,
true.
I'm tired of this business model, this Getcha business model. It's
Hmm.
driving me crazy. Okay,
Uh-huh. So,
Then
will
who's
you
gonna play
stop playing?
Zenless Zone
Yeah,
Zero for us?
that's right. Will you stop playing them
Josh
then?
too. He already wrote the preview.
Okay.
Child's like, I'm retiring. I'm done.
Chow being like, hey, somebody else has written about this game, so I'm just never going to touch this game ever.
That's
I
awesome.
refuse to touch ZZ. I'm falling asleep already.
Yeah, so this new character card that Genshin is apparently Chiori. She's a 5-star Geo wielder, whatever, Geo sword wielder. Um, and I guess part of this update is also gonna let you manage like a potion shop. Um, and yeah, great. I think
Typical
it's
Genshin
a little bit. It's
updates.
a little bit like what was the name of that game? That item management game once 10 million years ago. Um, fuck, I forgot what it was called. Yeah, it was a management.
Capitalism ho.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I don't know.
Oh, Rechitir.
Reciteer, yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so
Look,
There you
that
go.
game's quite the scene.
so yeah. Apparently, a like part of this update is going to be like a reciteer type activity.
Well, there was like a couple of events in Genshin before where you manage this flea market, and it just takes a while. It's like I was trying to like binge it to get like the free gems, but it was too late. It was like the event took like hours to finish. It just wasn't enough.
Nice.
Oh, but yeah, they have events like this before, from managing a fleet market, and there's a better version in Honkai where you manage this street where they were like selling stuff, and the most hilarious thing is they have like these flying cranes doing like Uber Eats or something for people, and they keep going to the wrong direction. I'm
I
like,
think
how
like
is it?
everything's gonna go better in Honkai from the outsider's perspective. It
Oh,
just seems like
basically Genshin's a beta test for all the bad stuff that happens in Genshin. They'll fix it in Honkai, and
great.
then when people whine enough about the fix that they had in Honkai, they'll put it back to Genshin. That's basically the vicious cycle right now.
I guess also on MiHoYo news this week, I guess they launched part 2 of Honkai Impact Third earlier this week too. I don't play that game, but apparently it's like a big update that like overhauls the game pretty much from top to bottom.
Yeah, I actually have never heard anyone say anything good things about Honkai Impact Third until like after Genshin Impact came out, and they're like, oh, they all went back to playing it, and then all of a sudden I see it like in top in the revenue charts and stuff. It's like, but before Genshin came out, I had never heard anyone spoken anything good about it.
Awesome.
At least in my perspective. Kind of funny how perspective changes very fast.
Also coming out just the day after the Genshin update, we're getting a version 1.1 update for Granblue Fantasy Relink. And uh, does this add? I know there's 2 characters that have yet to be added. As far as I can tell, this doesn't add a
No,
character. It just adds a new boss.
Two characters
that's
doesn't add till April.
yeah, that's the April
Gotcha.
update. Yeah,
So
this is
this has
part
the
of this
level
new update.
200 boss.
Yeah,
I'm
part of
trying to
this new
fight the
update
level
is
250 version in the mobile game.
yeah, the version 1.1 update. Part of it is going to be this new Lucilius endgame boss that they previewed in the January live stream, pre-release stream. Um, but they'll announce more details about this 1.1 update on March 14th. I mean, no, not March 14th, March 9, which is the anniversary stream. So next week, they'll say more about what's in this 1.1 update. But part of it is this new endgame boss. Um, People are hyping it up because
I
it's
hope
a
it has
bit.
the same bullshit from the mobile games, the 12 labors.
Yeah,
So in the mobile game, it's like you have to deal with these apples of Eden. It's like a debuff that they gave to you, and basically use like a debuff skill. Your character ends up with 5 debuffs, and you have a hard time getting rid of it, right? But if you decide to like buff yourself, you become a zombie. So if you decide to use a potion, you just kill yourself immediately.
oh, that's funny. So
So
yeah,
it's like full of these little quirky
so
mechanics.
so we'll see if like how many of the mechanics that has in a browser game move over to Relink, because we do know that it does have some way, shape, or form its 12 labors mechanic from the sub objectives in the footage that was shown, but we don't know exactly how they're going to be implemented
Yeah, it will be
in
crazy
Relink.
because that's a lot of mechanics that's all in at once for a mobile game. It's like a wall of text and telling you to clear all this shit. So, well, I'm hyped for it. I want to see how it goes.
Yeah, I want to see how it goes.
So now moving on to later in March. So this one we kind of talked about last week. How we talked about the Italian Souls-like Inatria, the last song, was originally slated to release the day of Elden Ring's expansion, which would have been June 21st. So on February 20th, the developer team behind Inatria, the last song, Jyamma Games, said they're going to launch on June 21st, and then the day after, From Software said, "Well, Shadow of the Erd Tree is also coming out on June 21st." And then we talked about the meme of the Undertaker behind whoever the other wrestler is. I don't watch wrestling. Saying like the Elden Ring DLC decided just to kind of crowd them out, and they kind of took to their Discord channel. They announced this in kind of a strange way. They made an official statement on their Discord, so I popped in the Discord, grabbed the text, and popped out. They tweeted on their game Twitter page to go visit the Discord for a new update when they could have just tweeted it. And like, all right, this seems silly. Then I went in there. And then this is an announcement of an announcement. On March 21st, during the Future Game Show stream, which I forgot what's happening, they will announce a new release date for Natria the Last Song. So chances are it's going to be pushed back to after Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree. And not a surprise, and seems like a smart move. The way they announced it was a bit strange, but other than that, makes sense to
Yeah,
me.
it's kind of very weird and also just like
I think it's
I,
genius. Okay, I have never seen people like delaying their game in case of like a major competition comes out.
and they're also waiting a full month to like just say that it's gonna be delayed. So like a lot of people don't like actually know it's gonna be delayed, as far as I know, because of the strange way they announced this.
Because they
Yeah.
announced the date and then they said, "We have an announcement." And then the announcement was, "We're gonna talk later about a new date." And it's like, "Well, what's the new date?" Like, you already had a date in mind. Why I don't know. It's a bit strange.
Well, at least they're not pushing it ahead when it's not. I don't know, finished maybe.
So this is also strange too, because at least they rectified part of this. Like when they first announced this thing on Twitter, on their Twitter bio, it says that it's still coming June 21st. So it's like okay, but then they took that off as just okay, great. But then their pinned tweet is still that June 21st date. So
Yeah,
uh,
that's true.
oh well, it is what it is.
On March 22nd, we're gonna get the release of Reverse Collapse Codename Bakery. This is, I believe, a tower defense game that came from the original mobile RPG Girls Frontline.
So it is from the creators of Girls Frontline. It's more of an XCOM rather than the tower defense
Okay.
game. Yeah, it's apparently a remake of their first ever project, which is called Bakery Girl. So it's not tower defense; it's more like an XCOM strategy game ish.
That's neat, and it's a premium title, right? Not free to play.
Yeah, correct. It's buy to play. They said it'll have uh, over 60 mainline stages across different story branches that is estimated to provide around 100 hours of gameplay,
Jesus.
according to developers. So, and for us, Chow, they have they put Japanese voice acting in it. They have seiyuu such as Ayane Sakura, Ai Yuki, Yui Ishikawa, Katsuyuki Konishi, and Hiromu Mineta.
All
Big
the big
names.
names. So
um,
when it comes to watching anime, me and my friend always meme that if
Mhm.
Kanishi is voicing this character, he's gonna be the ultimate major villain.
Maybe. It'll have let's see, a pretty an 18% off discount when it goes live on Steam to be bought. So you can get the game for on launch for about $20 for the base game, and then there's a digital deluxe edition that includes like some outfits for the characters, a digital art book, and the game's OST, and you can get that for about $33 USD, the deluxe edition when it comes out due to that discount. So they also have like an announcement trailer or a release date trailer for it, and just that this is a game that's been cooking over the years because they've been they've done closed tests, and they've also participated in like numerous like next fest events from Steam. So they've gotten like a lot of feedback from players to just make it an even better game. This has been in the verse for quite a while, so hopefully it's not a great release date, but hopefully for the people who do pick it up at launch, they have a great time. And if there's some free time in the year and this turns out to be a really good game, give it a shot.
Another game entering early access. This is a game that was announced at the Nintendo Direct last week. This is the follow-up to Underlilies, Magnolia, Bloom in the Mists. This will enter early access on March 25th. So let's see. Yeah, so similar to The Rest for the Wicked, the early access, of course, is Steam only, even though the game itself is slated to release late. Let's see. We have the release date. We
So
have the
so
early.
so
Go ahead,
the
James.
the way that the early access thing on Steam is phrased is a little bit weird. So early access itself releases on March 25th on PC. And then they said that it's going to be at least 6 months in early access, but depending on feedback, they might extend it to being a full year in early access. So they're currently planning to release it like out of early access at the end of this year, but if they feel like it's necessary, they're only aiming for the end of the fiscal year. That's
Gotcha.
it. Yeah, it's a bit weird.
I mean, yeah, at least they're very transparent about it. It's like we'll see how it goes. It's all based on like how our
I'm
community feels. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be like it won't require too much because like people like Ender Lilies, it seems to be more of the same. So it's like, yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
This is an interesting one. Biomutant announced a Switch port. This is the open world RPG from Experiment 101 and THQ Nordic that originally released in 2021. I said Nordic again.
Was
Nordic.
that the
Love
one
it.
that George reviewed?
Yeah.
Yes. So
If
they
I remember
announced.
correctly, he didn't like it.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. Uh, they announced the Switch version at some point last year, and we have a news article that says it was gonna launch for Nintendo Switch on November 30th. I I need to follow up with Adam maybe because I can't figure out where that announcement was made, and they never really announced a delay. It just never came out, and then they're now announcing that Biomutant's Nintendo Switch version will release on May 14th. So it was announced previously. We had a date that didn't seem to be valid, and now it's coming out on May 14th. And this includes any of the DLC that was added to the game post launch, and also it was released on like the current gen consoles in late 2022. Yeah, it wasn't that well received, but I had some interesting ideas, and it'll be available on Switch. Just one of those strange, like, did you know this is available on Switch? Just interesting stuff that gets ported
Is
there
that a
late, including
very
like
technical game? Like, is it like very graphical?
I don't know
it's open
exactly.
world,
Yeah,
so
it's pretty.
it's and if I remember right, one of the things they said when it was being developed is that it was like a team of like 35 or 40 people, so it was a
Yeah.
decently small team for an open world game. So not bleeding edge, but when anything, even something like this, I'm like, how will that run on Switch? I'm not sure.
It's interesting because
We'll
like
see.
the trailer that they released for the Switch release, they said all that the gameplay is recorded on from Switch, and that footage is 60 FPS.
Huh.
Huh.
Well, maybe we'll be an optimist and say this game might be a surprising good Switch port, like the Nier Automata one. We'll keep our eyes out. Here's another one of our early access discussions. So, in the same announcement from Nason that announced Dragonkin the Banished, we also got more details on the upcoming previously announced GreedFall 2. I forget if the subtitle was already announced, but it's called GreedFall 2: The Dying World. This is from Spiders. The original game was published by Focus Interactive. Focus Home. What is Focus called now? They just recently changed their name again.
Oh,
I
I
don't
don't
remember.
know. I don't
They were
remember.
Focus Home Interactive, and then they were just Focus Interactive, and then they changed their name again. And I don't. Let me Google this.
It's like
I'll
pretty
figure this
recent
out.
too.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Oh, now they're Focus Entertainment. Okay, there you
God.
go. But that's kind of a tangent because Nason ended up purchasing Spiders, the development studio, so they're now publishing GreedFall 2. GreedFall 2 is a prequel to the original game. The original game was kind of like a BioWare-esque RPG where you create a character, you encounter like 4 or 5 party members, you have a little bit of non-linearity in terms of like how you partake in the story, and you end up having like a bond system with your party members, etc. This game is a prequel, and based on the way they're describing it, I don't know if you create a character because the announcement trailer for this is a CG trailer featuring a female native to the island here for D. So this is before any of the events of the original game took place, and the accompanying text for this talks about playing as a native islander. It's possible that you can choose what this islander looks like. It just I can't get a good latch on whether you have a bespoke role assigned to you or if you have a custom character that you can make, but we'll see. The interesting thing is that this is launching in early access this summer, and then launching on a later date for consoles and PC. They don't say if the later date is this year; they just say at a later date. So this is game number 3 that we've talked about this, I think number 3, this podcast that is entering early access first. So kind of an interesting decision. It's our first time that this studio has published a game under this new publisher. I don't know if Nason has a lot of experience with early access. They might be just trying it out. It's a bit of an unknown. And it's a single player RPG that I'm not sure early access would. It's just interesting. I guess I'm trying to make a judgment call on it, but I'm struggling to come up with like, is this good? Is this bad? Is this weird? I don't know. But
I'm sure that title will drive Adam crazy with that one word greedfall with the capital F in the middle.
oh yeah, we had a little side tangent. Uh, for any of you that have a blog or anything, when games use either a Roman numeral or an Arabic 2 or 3 or whatever, GreedFall 2 apparently does it both ways. They use either the GreedFall Roman numeral 2 or the Arabic 2. And that's just, I assume, for SEO. That way people can search it either way and find their game. But we try to be consistent with what the publisher uses when we put the games in our system, and we're like, how should we call this one? How should we capitalize it? I'm pretty excited for this. Greedfall 1, I thought was one of those games that it was an average game, but it showed a lot of potential. So I'm excited for a follow-up to that where they can realize the potential. There's just 2 things that keep me a little bit more anxious is too strong a word, hesitant, is that I felt the same way about Elex, and then Elex 2 was worse than the first game. And then this has the whole fact that it's under a different publisher now. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I will probably not partake in early access, but I'll keep an eye on it just to see what the like feedback is. But pretty much any of these games in early access, I've got enough games on my plate that I'll just wait for the full release. And I'm guessing for this one it'll be next year, but they didn't specify that. They just said at a later date. We have an announcement of a localization of the Switch ports for Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth trilogy. So I honestly struggled to parse this a little bit because there's so many games in the series. The Rebirth trilogy is already on Switch in and other consoles in Japan. They're being brought over to the West for Switch in 2024, but not the PlayStation versions. And that's kind of how I parsed it. I'm not sure what the decision making before that was, but a few of the other Hyperdimension Neptunia games have been ported to Switch and must have done pretty well. including like Sisters versus Sisters recently. So now the Rebirth trilogy will also be available on Switch in the West later this year.
Hello, this is Adam. I'm usually a participating member of the podcast, although I was absent today. However, here I am editing in post, and I wanted to correct the record on some of the Neptunia details because Brian got them wrong. The announcement is that Neptunia Rebirth 1, Rebirth 2, and Rebirth 3 have been announced for Nintendo Switch in both Japan and the West. The Japanese versions will come out on May 23rd. The Western versions have not been dated. Now, in Japan, the 3 games will also come to PlayStation 4. In fact, the first game is already on PlayStation 4. The second 2 games are not. However, the first game never made its way west, and the second and third games, Idea Factory International has announced that those will also not make their way west for some reason. I don't know why. Kind of a side note to that is that Neptunia 1 did get a PlayStation 5 version called Neptunia Reverse, and that game already released worldwide. But you won't be able to get the PlayStation 4 versions in the West for some reason. That's it. Back to your regularly scheduled programming.
They're prepping whenever they announce the new mainline Neptunia game for real.
When they had the main bad guy, custom firmware. Wait till it gets sued by some big publisher.
Aren't we getting that new Mario Monogatari game this year?
In Japan, I think. I think it's this year. I forgot.
Yeah. We haven't seen
Yeah.
anything about it yet, so I'm
No.
curious.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't even know what a fucking new Neptunia storyline would.
Look,
make
I have
fun of
totally
because
lost
there's
track of them.
because there's so much. There's so much that's happened between like the last main line and then this new one in the game industry that like I don't know what you make fun of because like it's somehow gotten like there's 10 new fires that happen in the game industry.
They should
then.
have
So it's
a
just like-
bit. They should have a bit where they add in a representation of Google Stadia and then just immediately kill her off.
Oh damn, that'd be savage. You also have yeah, I
It
guess
would be
this
in
game-
line. It would be in line. It would be in line with the types of jokes they like to make.
Yeah.
So,
But I don't I'm sure they would somehow try to poke fun at AI. I don't know what else you think of.
The current
so many
lawsuit that's going with emulators again.
There's this general state of the industry of like so many fucking people getting laid off. I don't know. Like, everything's on fire.
well, they wouldn't touch that part of it because the layoffs aren't happening in Japan. So,
I guess.
That kind of covers us for like the date rundown for the rest of the year that we know so far. We do have one final note here on our podcast doc for announcement, and that is the producer of Harvestella, the Square Enix like farming sim action RPG hybrid that released in 2022. Daisuke Taka is leaving Square Enix. He'll be formally leaving the company at the end of April. He has not announced like where he's going or what his follow-up plans are. So obviously, we wish him the best of luck. Harvestella is one of those games where it was in the middle of that deluge of kind of those AA Square titles that had a mismatch of where they were launching. This one happened to be Switch and PC. I know James and I both played this and both thought pretty fondly of it.
I have not actually finished it yet. I only put like 20
Okay.
hours into it, but I did like what I played, and everyone I know that's gotten around and actually finished it, it's one of those games where it's not perfect by any means, but it's got a lot of sauce. It's got a lot of sauce.
It gave me, I'll just put it this way, it gave me a lot of near vibes when I played through it, and my hour count on this was something like 80 hours. Like it's a long game, which I know is par for the course seemingly, but I enjoyed it way more. I got it on a whim, and I enjoyed it way more than I was expecting to. It's got a lot of fun story moments. It's got a lot of poignant, kind of sad, bittersweet moments, but also like it rebounds those with happy, like jubilant moments after the fact. The farming sim elements, I'm not much of a farming sim player, so I can't really compare those. But I enjoyed it for what it was. It's like kind of like this hybrid. I think it leans more towards the action RPG than it does farming sim, which is why it spoke to me. But if you want to play like something that was more reminiscent of Harvest Moon or something like that, probably not as in depth. But obviously, we wish Mr. Taka the best, and maybe we'll see if this game ever gets ported to Sony or Xbox platforms.
Yeah, best of luck on whatever decides to do next. Produce
Mhm.
Harvestella, pretty solid title, but also was produced a game that I used to play and was fond of, another Eden.
Mhm.
Um, the not a consistent track record of backing, producing interesting projects.
I guess now that I'm reading this more carefully, he says he revealed that he has not decided on his future plans yet.
Yeah,
Not that he hasn't revealed them, he hasn't decided.
yeah,
He admits that leaving the company without a clear future is very reckless, but I guess he just knows that it's time for a change, and we've all kind of been there.
yeah.
Yep.
And that covers us for all the news topics of this episode of the Tetracast. And we already kind of talked about all the things we could potentially talk about next week, not least of which being the release of Unicorn Overlord. At the time we um, record, that game will have been out like a day. So we'll see if we're in a place to talk about that next week. But lots of games coming out in early March and in April, as you all know. Obviously, all the reviews and guide pages about the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, as listeners play through that, are up on the website at rpgsite.net. Go do give Josh's review a read through, and then we will almost be certainly talking about that game later in the year as it comes towards end of the year discussions. You can follow RPG Site on all the social media platforms. Just search for RPG Site on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and you should be able to find us. You should be able to find us on Discord at discord.gg/RPG Site, or hit the link at the top of our homepage. Am I missing anything? I don't think so.
I don't have to continue our Rebirth playthroughs. So the
Mhm.
faster this is done, the sooner we can get back. You know what I'm
There
saying,
we go.
Chow?
Look, I've been committing a lot of time in 4 different things. Okay, I'll do my best, but
How's
I
your
make sure that I put at least 5 hours in each day.
At least I
how's
have.
how's your Granblue guide going?
I
Your little
am
guide.
still not touching the end game content.
There you go. All right, but until you hear from us all next time, stay safe and take care, and we'll talk to you all next week.